p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Bank of England hikes interest rates to 4.25%, but are we finally getting to grip with inflation?
Good morning to you. It's 6 o'clock on Friday, the 24th of March. This is Breakfast on GB News with Stephen and Ellie. These are your top stories.
The Bank of England's governor says he has a more optimistic view of the economy. That's despite the decision to raise interest rates. The move has left hundreds of thousands of homeowners facing mortgage rates of over 8%, with banks now under pressure to offer more support.
We're going to get the latest view from the public in our GB News People's Poll as we deliver your verdict on Boris Johnson and the Met Police.
Sir Keir Starmer has revealed he paid over £60,000 in tax last year after releasing his full tax returns. The Labour leader followed in the wake of the Prime Minister, who released his own tax returns earlier this week.
And on Prince William's final day visiting Poland, he spent time talking to Ukrainian refugees and the Polish communities hosting them. He also had a meal out with his staff at an LGBT restaurant as he continues to work to promote safe spaces.
And as ever, you can join in any of our discussions this morning by emailing gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet us at gbnews.
And actually, if you're pacing round the lounge or the kitchen or the bedroom this morning, is it because you've had a coffee? Because there's a survey out this morning saying if you're a coffee drinker, you walk about 1,000 steps more per day than people who don't drink coffee, but you will sleep worse. So maybe that's why you walk more, because you're up earlier in the morning walking around.
It makes sense, doesn't it? You are literally caffeinated. You're more caffeinated, so perhaps that's why you're getting more exercise. Or it was my day off yesterday, and I took myself for a walk to get my coffee. So maybe that's what people are doing. I know quite a few people who do that.
Yeah.
You know, combine the exercise with getting a coffee.
Not a
Let
bad
us know
idea.
if it's something you're finding you're doing more of. gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Now, in our latest GB News People's Poll, we've asked people to give their verdict on both Boris Johnson and the Metropolitan Police following a controversial week for both.
Well, regarding the former Prime Minister, 48% thought that the investigation into his alleged misleading of Parliament was fair, while only 11% thought the inquiry was unfair.
The poll also showed that 45% of the public have got a negative view of the Metropolitan Police following the release of the Casey report, just 10% having a positive view.
Well, joining us now is the former Special Advisor to Michael Gove, Charlie Rowley. Good morning to you, Charlie.
Morning.
Thank you for joining us. Let's start with this Privileges Committee investigation into Boris Johnson. Obviously, it's been in the headlines this week. 11%, only 11%, say the investigation has been unfair. What do you make of those results?
Yes, and I don't know if anybody had the 3.5 hours to 4 hours to spare, but I certainly did the other day, and I watched it in full. And I think for all the talk about the committee might be biased, some of the things that some of the members had said previously, I actually think it was a fair hearing. I think it was right that some of the questions that they asked were asked directly to former Prime Minister Boris Johnson. And I think it showed, in order to restore trust in politics, Parliament and MPs doing the job that they're exercised to do. So it was fascinating viewing, but I think the way in which it was conducted reflects why I think almost 50% of people thought that it was fair. Only 11%, as you say, thought that it wasn't fair, and I suspect around about the other 40% don't care.
Yeah, well, yes, I mean, it's like don't know or don't care, isn't it? I mean, it's right, though, isn't it? I mean, whether people back Boris Johnson or not, it's absolutely right that people are held to account.
Exactly so, and I think, look, there's no doubt about, as he's admitted himself, that he misled Parliament. The question that the committee were trying to ask is obviously whether it was intentional or reckless. But I think what was most astonishing, actually, about the hearing is that when the rules were being put together, the guidance that was being issued, Boris Johnson's defence seemed to be that he thought that it was OK, and as part of a workplace setting, that it was OK to raise a glass to somebody that might be leaving. Now, I don't think that there would be any other organisation across the country during that time that thought having any kind of social gathering or leaving drinks would have been part of a normal work day-to-day practice.
However, though, there are very few other people and companies and all the rest of it who actually still had people in the office doing that. They were in a pretty unique situation anyway, weren't they?
They would have been, but no different to people that were on the front line of the NHS or people that were still maintaining other public services, whether it is the police, which I'm sure we'll come on to, or whether it was, as you say, the NHS or any other fire rescue service. I think anyone else that was able and should have still been at work still would not have been breaching the rules in the way in which it seemed to be in number 10.
Let's talk about the police then, as you mentioned. I don't know quite how to read this. The headline is, from the poll, if you like, 45% of the public have a negative view of the Metropolitan Police. But actually, if you look at it, 10% have got a positive view, 24% a neutral view. So that's 35%... in that sense, not being negative about them. It's still not a good figure, but it's perhaps not as stark as it initially looks.
I think that's absolutely right, actually. And I think one of the things that I think has come out on the back of the Casey review and all of the problems that we've heard and the stories that you've heard that have begrudged the Metropolitan Police, things like the Wayne Couzens and Sarah Everard case, David Carrick. These are awful, awful crimes that have really brought the spotlight, or shone the spotlight onto the Metropolitan Police. But I think there is amongst the public a feeling that we still want to support the police. You know, we police by consent in this country. And there are many officers that I've been hearing on the back of that Casey report, many other interviews, who say that they are ashamed and scared to tell people what they do, to say that they're a police officer. Now, that is terrible. You know, these are people that put on that uniform, they go out day to day to put their lives on the line to protect us as a public. They do a fantastic job, by and large, and it's always, it seems to me, I hope, a minority of people that bring organisations into disrepute, but it seems that there have just been one too many cases within the Met, in particular, that really have worried people and, as I say, rocked that confidence and trust in the police.
But the Metropolitan Police and Sir Mark Rowley and London Mayor Steve Khan, they've got a long way to go, haven't they, to reinstate that trust from people and from Londoners?
They absolutely do, and it's about making sure that, look, they focus on tackling crime, that they're protecting communities, in the way in which communities really want them to. It's about widening and broadening the recruitment, so making sure that they have a more diverse police service, to make sure that they are representing communities that they serve, and making sure that when, as I say, the Casey report was very clear that there was misogyny, sexism, racism, homophobia in the Metropolitan Police Service, so that you can have people within that service to, as I say, stamp out and what they've been accused of, and make sure that, as I say, it's a police service that represents all of us and keeps us all safe.
Here's an interesting one, and I do think this is absolutely fascinating in a way, the difference between the main political parties, because there's everything to play for, of course, with the next election, and we're also showing a 21-point lead for Labour. 27% of people say there's a great difference between Labour and the Conservatives. 25% say some difference. 23%, so all pretty equal figures, say no difference between the parties. Now, that to me suggests, actually, there's not a lot of clear blue water.
No, and so that's why I think it might be that actually what people cast their vote on when it comes to the election is on the basis of the leader. So who is leading the country and who would make the better Prime Minister? Now, there was another poll, I think, last week, Delta, that said that there was only a 10-point gap between Labour and the Conservatives. That's the closest it's been for some time. So, as you're absolutely right to say, Stephen, it's all to play for. And some of that polling that has, as I say, reduced might be on the back of the small boats deal that Suella announced last week. It might be on the Windsor Framework and the deal with the EU that Rishi announced, and which was voted on earlier this week as well. As you start to see the government deliver on its priorities, the priorities that Rishi Sunak set out at the start of this year, it might just be that the tables are turning and people are saying, actually, this guy's very confident, competent, and is the man that actually we want to entrust to see us through the economic turmoil, to deal with the small boats, to get the backlogs cleared on the NHS, and to get this country going.
Has he got enough time to do that, do you think, Charlie? I mean, we're looking at next year, aren't we, for a general election?
Well, we are, and it might be, actually, that one of the best polls, one of the only indications of the polls will be in May, when we have the local elections, which isn't too far away. So that will be a real sort of telling point to see whether the public have are going to back the Conservatives perhaps locally, and that might be whether they go on to back the Tories nationally in a year's time. But you say it's not that long to go. We'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, we will. Charlie, we're going to catch up with you next hour. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Let's bring you up to date with what else is going on today at 10 minutes past 6.
And protesters in France have set fire to buildings as demonstrations continue over government plans to raise the pension age. It's the 9th day of nationwide protests against the French president's pension reforms. Firefighters got to the blaze at Bordeaux Town Hall under control, and it's still being determined, the cause of which is still being determined.
Tourists are going to be allowed to stand for the first time in the exact spot where the King will be crowned in a new display in Westminster Abbey, but they're going to have to wear socks. Specially guided barefoot tours will include access to the Cosmati pavement, which is usually closed off to the public. It opens on April the 12th and is included in entrance to the Abbey. Why would you need socks? Or why would you not wear shoes? I don't understand.
I think the idea is that if you're wearing shoes, you might tread down onto the carpet and cause damage. So they've got people wearing the socks.
Right.
Could be quite smelly, couldn't it?
Well, there you go. All very, very odd.
Would you like to see that stand where the King is going to be
I think
crowned?
I'd like to stand where the King was crowned. I did go to Edinburgh and St Giles Cathedral last month and stood in the exact spot where the Queen's coffin was when people there were paying tribute in St Giles, and that was... I just very quietly did it. But you know, when you just think, I don't know, it just felt remarkable. So, I mean, why? I don't know why. You know, thousands of people walk over those paving slabs every week. But just to think, this is where she was.
A moment in history, yeah, absolutely. I queued to watch the Queen lying in state in Westminster Hall. It didn't take me very long, actually. It took me about 5 hours, if I remember correctly.
Right.
But before it got crazy, because remember they started shutting off the queue.
Yeah.
And it became like an 18-hour thing. I did it just at the right time. Really early in the morning, I think.
Was it a
5
poignant
o'clock in the morning.
moment?
It was amazing, yeah. Worth every second. It was beautiful, yeah. Really amazing.
Yeah, interesting.
Moment in history.
Well, it's these little bits of history. So interesting. If you go and stand where the King is going to be crowned, let us know. gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Now, the Bank of England has raised interest rates to the highest level in nearly 15 years.
Yes, it was pressured into the move after what turned out to be a shock rise in inflation. It bounced up a little bit, as we reported in the week, to 10.4%. Of course, that's bad news for people already struggling to pay their mortgage. Let's talk to business and finance commentator Michael Wilson. Good to see you this morning, Michael. I mean, obviously, it's bad news for people who are already struggling in the cost of living crisis. However, we've got to remind ourselves, haven't we, that these are still very ordinary rates of that we're looking at now, compared, even though we've got used to these ridiculously low rates for a long period of time.
Depends where you're coming from, doesn't it? That's the thing. I mean, they have been ridiculously low. 0.1 they were not that long ago, and then suddenly now 4.75%, 4.25% rather, which is, you know, that's a big increase. It doesn't really matter that 4.25 doesn't sound a lot. It still is in comparison. There you are. You see, there's your graph. Absolutely. There's that flat line of when they were 0.1%, and then this is the 11th back-to-back rise since 2021. You see, so that I mean, this is really hitting people. And actually, the chairperson, I'll call her that, of the Treasury Committee yesterday said that Harriet Baldwin, this is, and she was saying that banks are very, 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 very quick to raise. In fact, they raise the interest that you pay on your loan and on your mortgage immediately as soon as that news comes out of the Bank of England. That rise in interest rates ought to be helping savers. And of course, I mean, if you're still saving and you're happy with those kind of rates, but it takes a long, long time, much longer, for savers to actually benefit. However, the bank couldn't really do much else but raise interest rates. You quite rightly referred to that 10.4 increase as far as inflation is concerned. But I would drill down and ask you presumably to drill down as well with me, if you would, to where core inflation is. That's the most important thing. And that was just over 6%, and that's just about in line. So basically, what you saw in February, this 10.4 in inflation, is about things like clothing and footwear, which are notably volatile as far as prices are concerned. Now, do you want any good news from what the bank was saying yesterday? There's only some marginal bits. You're quite right to focus on the cost of living. Doesn't matter what inflation is. The cost of living is high. The cost of living is high. However, inflation probably will come down as this year goes on. And it could be that interest rates might be falling to 3% by 2024. Now, that was the decent news that I took out of what was all being said yesterday. Yeah, it was very much expected that they would raise rates, just as central banks around the world are being forced to do to contain inflation. But there is a glimmer of light. Let's focus on that.
Yes, and that certainly was the message, wasn't it, from Andrew Bailey yesterday, saying he's feeling more hopeful for the economy, and he doesn't think the UK is going to be heading into recession now. No, I mean, no recession, slight growth. Again, I you know, who cares about the word recession and what the technical iteration of that actually is? I mean, if people are feeling hard up, they're feeling hard up. But interestingly, out this morning, consumer confidence figures that show actually a slight rise in consumer confidence. Yeah, people are worried about their own money, but as far as spending it is concerned, they're slightly more optimistic about the way the UK is heading. So yeah, avoiding a recession, if you want to term it as that, are people finding the going tough? Yeah, of course, will that continue for the next couple of years? Yes, I'm afraid it will. There's nothing we can do about it, unfortunately. But don't listen to anybody that says to you this is all about things outside our control and happening in the rest of the world. What these inflation figures were showing on Wednesday and what the bank was reacting to is precisely everything that's wrong with the UK at the moment, and the fact that it's having to weather this cost of living storm.
Yeah, will this increase, though, actually make a difference in terms of bringing that level of inflation under control?
It's the only weapon that central banks have. It's called monetarism, and I mean, it just, you know, it's taken, apart from places like I think Albania's one, Turkey's certainly another, and it could be Venezuela as well. But apart from those kind of places, what central banks do is they see inflation rising, therefore they raise interest rates to try to contain it. What they're trying to do is crimp people's ability and wish to spend money and to borrow money. And they feel that that's the only weapon that they have, really. And if they feel they do, that's called monetarism, as I said to you. And that's all they have. Fiscal stuff is about tax, and that's what the budget does. But monetarism is what the central banks do around the world. And they're all facing exactly the same problem. You have to trust politicians and central bank governors who say what we need to do is clamp down on inflation first of all, and then we'll worry about the rest of the economy.
Michael, like you say, hopefully that's the last interest rate hike that we see. That they start to come down in a different direction now.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, people are going to be facing mortgage rates of 8%. Do you think there will be pressure on banks to offer more support for those people?
Well, I mean, the only thing that pressurizes banks is you, I think, and if you want to get over the public, if you want to get over the normal inertia that there is about banks, and you start to shop around, that will force banks to rethink this, because the banks don't want bad customers any more than the mortgage companies do. But there is now, this morning, a sort of 50-50 chance that this will be the last interest rate rise of this particular cycle. That's what the money markets are saying right now. Now, I'm not saying the money markets are always right, but that is the general feeling, that the Bank of England is sort of reaching the end of its interest rate rising cycle. A 50-50 bet at the moment, that may increase. But as I said, there is a general feeling that rates should be down to around about 3% possibly by the middle of next year. But again, I wouldn't bet the ranch against it, but that's the way people are thinking at the moment.
OK, Michael, good to see you this morning. Thanks very much indeed.
Now, coming up, we're discussing World Tuberculosis Day with Dr. Anita Raja.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Deebs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 6:21. Good morning to you. You're watching and listening to Breakfast on GB News with Stephen and Ellie.
Still to come on the programme, the Prince of Wales has been in Poland for a surprise visit, and our reporter Cameron Walker will be bringing us the latest.
At 7 o'clock, the Office for National Statistics will release retail figures for February. We'll break them down with a retail expert.
And do get in touch in all the usual ways this morning. You can email us gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet us at GB News.
Now, today is World Tuberculosis Day. Get my teeth in this morning. And it serves to raise awareness about the devastating consequences of TB, which, of course, as you know, affects the lungs.
It was 141 years ago today that Dr. Robert Koch announced he discovered the bacterium that caused TB, which began the journey towards diagnosis and cure.
But what are the symptoms of TB, and are we doing enough to support the cause of sort of dealing with it, getting rid of it? Let's talk to NHS GP Dr. Anita Raja. Good to see you, Anita, as always. I mean, TB is something that we know very little about as members of the public these days, aren't we? It seems to be extremely rare, certainly in the UK, but what is its prevalence?
We've done really well in the UK, actually, if we compare ourselves to the rest of Europe. And in terms of awareness, yes, I agree, there's not much information out there. And it's so important that people like you come forward and talk about this very important topic. Now, tuberculosis is a condition which affects your lungs predominantly, but it's not just restricted to the lungs, because it can spread to your glands, your lymph nodes, it can spread to your bones and other parts of your body. Tuberculosis is a condition which can be identified if you are having a cough which lasts more than 3 weeks, you're having weight loss, you're having night sweats, you have lymphadenopathy, which essentially means that the lymph nodes, the glands in your neck are up, or any glands in your body are up, which you're concerned about for a period of more than 3 weeks. Then it's vital that you speak to your general practitioner, your GP, who would then be interested in requesting a chest X-ray to look at your chest.
And what happens if it's not caught early? It can get very serious, can't it?
It certainly can. And the beauty, though, about the disease is that it's a bacterial infection, and most bacterial infections do have a cure. So if we nip the evil in the bud, then we can offer you antibiotics, which is over a long period of time. So you may need to be on these for a couple of months, and we can treat tuberculosis. And 2 to 3 weeks of taking the antibiotics, you're not infectious anymore. So essentially, this means that if somebody has tuberculosis, they're living with their family, we've commenced them on antibiotics, over a period of 2 to 3 weeks, they will not be infectious anymore. So other people are unable to catch it from them, which is excellent. And but then again, you know, when we look at the tuberculosis of other countries, or people who are taking antibiotics for even viral illnesses, for them, it's a bit of a problem to treat the tuberculosis, because they could suffer from something called multiple drug-resistant tuberculosis, which is a bit tougher to treat. We can still treat it, but we can do this with first-line drugs, and we sort of need input from microbiologists, and then we need to put them on stronger antibiotics.
But aren't most people now vaccinated? I mean, you know, I don't know what age it is now. Is it early secondary school? And I mean, certainly back in my day, everyone got a booster.
Yeah, so now in the UK, we offer the BCG vaccine to anyone under the age of 35 and babies, newborn babies who are sort of high risk. Now, the question really is, who is high risk? High risk is any person who is from a country that is high risk for TB, where there's a prevalence of tuberculosis. High risk is a baby that's born in a family, for instance, a second generation from someone who's from a family that belongs to Africa originally, South Asia, which includes India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, sort of China. Those children are then offered the BCG vaccine. But no, not everyone is offered the BCG vaccine. You need to be high risk, from, categorized as high risk.
As you were saying, it's very rare now in the UK to have TB. It's planned to be eliminated entirely in England by 2035, but it still is a massive killer around the world, isn't it? Do you think that there needs to be more funding, more effort to try and end TB globally?
Certainly, especially in third world countries where people are so poor they can't afford food. I mean, tuberculosis is the least of their worries. Imagine a family of 15 people living in one room, overcrowded, no ventilation. One member catches tuberculosis, the whole family is affected. It's very expensive because it's private healthcare in third world countries, essentially, and people need to pay for their medications. They need to pay for their treatments. This is why we need to really cherish the NHS, which is an excellent system. If only we could make it work. It's really, you're absolutely right. I mean, in third world countries, WHO should make more of an effort and there should be more awareness. But you see, in those countries, I guess priority is surviving and not really being treated for tuberculosis.
OK, Dr. Raja, good to see you this morning. Thanks very much indeed. I mean, it's amazing where we've moved on. I mean, my grandma used to talk, it's known as consumption.
Consumption,
wasn't it,
yes,
back in the day? And the number of people, I mean, she knew loads of people who died from consumption. You know, it was just like a really common thing. But we are in this amazing position now where it's just not a problem for most of us, but still need to be honest, can't forget about it.
No, and that's important, isn't it? We were having a conversation in the newsroom this morning, and one of the producers was asking if it had been eradicated because it is so rare in this country. But the point is, it's not yet. We're on the way, but globally, it's still a killer. So, as Dr. Raja was just saying, funding is very, very important to completely eradicate this disease.
Loads of you have been in touch already. Talfin, I just wanted to read this one out from Talfin, because it's an interesting point. Isn't it interesting how we view this is all about the Boris Johnson evidence being given, and we're used to things being like a court of law, but everything has to be very neutral. And Talfin says, Harriet Harman and Bernard Jenkins had both tweeted negative comments about Boris Johnson previous to the committee meeting, so they should have stood down. But that's not how it works, is it? I mean, this is political. You're allowed to have those sort of views and make them known. But the point is, it's the result of the inquiry will be a sort of consensus across the board. The fact that Harriet Harman and Bernard Jenkins are anti-Boris Johnson's position before they've seen the evidence doesn't mean they can't change their mind, but it also doesn't mean they're ineligible to have their say.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. Con's been in touch this morning. Good morning to you, Con. He says they have a party. They say a party is not just one man. So if Boris was taking advice, as always, from advisors, then it was them. They didn't give him the right advice. Why are they not being held to account? This is a witch hunt. They just want that man gone for good. It's disgusting. There are a lot of people, especially in the GB News inbox, that are saying this is a witch hunt.
Is it, though? I don't know. I mean, it's important to work out. Misleading Parliament is like a really serious thing, isn't it? So it's as to whether... And he said he did mislead Parliament because he's admitted that it was all in the wrong in that sense, but he didn't realise it. So he unintentionally misled Parliament. So that's got to be... You've got to work that out, haven't you, as to whether he did or he didn't. I know what you mean. It does feel like everyone's having a go, but then... Don't we need to hold people to account?
Yeah, and it's riding on that, isn't it? It's did he knowingly or recklessly mislead Parliament? And that second word, recklessly, has only just been brought in. Lots of people having an issue with that, saying they're just trying to, stick anything on him. Let us know what you think this morning. gbviews@gbnews.uk. It's certainly something that's going to rumble on for Boris Johnson, isn't it?
It certainly is.
The next few days.
We've got lots coming your way, though, in just a few minutes, including all the newspapers, so don't go anywhere.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things. We've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit off.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
It's 6:32. Good morning. This is Breakfast with Stephen and Ellie.
And let's take a look at today's front pages for you now. And the Times leads with the rise in council tax. The average bill will now top £2,000 for the first time.
Taxpayers have spent close to £500 million buying beds in England's worst care homes over the past 4 years, according to The Guardian.
A group of woke barristers will refuse to prosecute climate activists. That's according to the Daily Mail.
The Eye says there'll be no major tax cuts this year after the Bank of England's decision to raise the base rate yet again.
And the Daily Express focuses on the Bank of England's governor's more optimistic forecast for the UK economy.
For the Telegraph today, the possibility of a rise in capital gains tax if there's a Labour government.
The Daily Mirror says that a footballer accused of raping 2 women now faces a third charge, but is still playing for his Premier League club. He is an unnamed player.
And The Sun celebrates Harry Kane becoming England's all-time leading goal scorer.
The Financial Times leads with the efforts of TikTok's chief executive to avert a US ban on the viral video app.
And have killer machines taken over the world? That's the question being asked on the front of the Daily Star.
We can always rely on the Daily Star for something different, can't we?
We're
very interested in this story, yeah.
The mastermind behind the Terminator fears fiendishly clever artificial intelligence may have secretly taken over the world without us realising.
AI has gone too far, according to the Daily Star.
There you go. There's no such thing as AI yet.
No.
It doesn't actually exist yet. So there you go.
Watch this
Work that out, Daily Star. Who knows? Anyway, let's go through the papers in a bit more detail with the political editor of the Sunday Mirror and Sunday People, Nigel Nelson, and Claire Pearsall, former Conservative advisor. Good morning to you both.
Good morning.
Nice to see you. Claire, let's start with the Times. Should we looking at council tax? We've all just had our council tax bills in recently.
We have, when that envelope drops through the door and you open it with a sense of horror. But unfortunately, councils need to have the revenue in to have the services available that people need. When you're looking at county councils having to fill potholes, and I appreciate the government is putting money into potholes, but it is an enormous cost. District councils look after bins and parking and all of those really useful green spaces that we all love. It all costs money.
Well, it does, as long as they're not all going off on jollies to twin with another town halfway around the world, which we pay for, or they're not having these works of art or statues of things put up in front of the council offices.
Do you know what? The majority of councils work extremely hard. They look after the places that we live in, they collect your refuse on time, and there are going to be those who aren't quite as above board and will spend money out on the most ridiculous things. But now I think people are aware of that. They can go and look into where this money is going, what is being raised and how they're spending it. People are a lot better at uncovering this information. So I think it is incumbent upon all of us to look at local authorities, to look at anybody in elected positions, to see how they're spending your money. Because I do agree, there is a lot of waste that goes on. But unfortunately, everything has become more expensive. We all want the services, but they are going to have to be paid for. And central government have slashed the budgets of local authorities up and down the country. So there isn't much fat to trim off of these budgets a lot of the time. The only way you can raise this revenue, unfortunately, is from householders. And that's the real problem when you're in a cost of living crisis. There's a pinch on absolutely everybody. So I don't envy. I've had to make decisions regarding council tax and budgets at a local council level, and it's really tough. You have to balance out the needs of individuals with the needs to provide a service, some of which are statutory. You have no choice. It is a really hard time. It will get better. But unfortunately, as we all know, council tax bills will go up. They very rarely, if ever, come down.
No.
Yeah, but in the meantime, homeowners are facing financial pain, aren't they? I mean,
Indeed they are.
Mortgage rates now over 8%.
Yeah, and inflation is still going up. I mean, it will go down by the end of the year. I think nothing to do with government or any, but with energy costs coming down, we are going to feel better off. That we seem to, if the Bank of England and the Office of Budget Responsibility is right, we're going to avoid a recession this year. Certainly inflation will halve and possibly go even lower. The Chancellor thinks it'll go lower. It looks like we'll get a bit of growth. So by the end of the year, people are going to start feeling a bit better. But yeah, the trouble is that it's all very well saying that. Prices have gone up a huge amount. So if prices stop going up now, we would have naught inflation in a year's time. But that doesn't mean you haven't got higher prices already and you never go backwards.
Talking money, Nigel, in the Telegraph, Angela Rayner, Labour's deputy leader, says we need to pay more tax on savings and investments.
This is capital gains tax, and it's all a question of fairness, really. At the moment, that if we're paying income tax on, basic rate 20%, 40% upper rate, and 45% as the top rate. But if you've got shares or you've got second homes you want to flog off or something like that, you only pay 20% in capital gains tax. Now, if you think about it, that is actually income. So should you not be paying the same rate on that kind of income?
But it's income based on money that you've put aside. I mean, it's very British,
or
isn't it?
speculated with.
Well, speculated, but for most people, of course, it's just money that they're putting away for their retirement, isn't it? If they've got a portfolio or anything like that, then why should they pay more than
Well, in the same way that if your pension comes into tax, you would pay income tax on that. So,
which is ridiculous in and of itself, isn't it?
Well, it depends how much it is. I mean, if you've got people bringing in pensions of 100,000 or something like that, and there are, top civil servants or people like that do get that kind of pension, they should face income tax like the rest of us do. And the same thing applies to if you've got a second home. If you don't sell it, then you won't be paying any tax on it. The moment that you sell it and make a profit on it, that's when capital gains tax comes in.
Well, yes, but should that be increased in line with income tax?
See, no, I don't think it should. And this is Labour now going after tax increases, and we can all see the way that a potential Labour government would behave. It's a raid on people's savings. We're all encouraged to save. We're all encouraged to have that little something extra put away for a rainy day, and then Labour would just come along and take the majority of it in tax.
Says my Tory wife.
But I just think it's ridiculous, and it's one of those very lazy things that if you've worked hard, you've managed to have a second property. It could be through the death of a parent that you've ended up with a second property. So it's no fault of your own. You're not a property speculator. But you would then be taxed atrociously high on that. And I just hate this way of taxing people as the only way to get growth in a country. It doesn't work.
And this is presumably this is often going to be older people.
It is going to be. And it's going to be people that fall into it unnecessarily. And as you've said, this is people who perhaps have just saved a little bit extra. Their pensions have done quite well, which is fantastic. It's not something that they have done themselves necessarily. They're not these great wealthy billionaires. These are ordinary people that get caught up, and that's always the people that get targeted. The people sort of strolling along in the middle, trying to do everything right, and Labour are just going to hit them even harder.
Claire, let's have a look at the Telegraph, shall we? And this is Easter travel chaos. Heathrow is being told stop selling tickets at their airlines because of the strikes. It's just another level of chaos again for people looking to get away at a school holiday. And I lose track now of how many times
There have been strikes either abroad in air traffic control, in our own country with, and this one I believe will be passport office. I just wonder how long the industry will accept this when demand for travelling abroad has increased since the pandemic. Everybody wants to go away, everybody wants to get their lives back on track, and these strikes are just pulling the country to pieces once again. And it just seems that every time something gets settled, whether it be with train workers, with doctors, nurses, paramedics, someone else then starts up, and here we have the Public and Commercial Services Union and passport offices. This is the point where you start to wonder how much the country will take from this. And I think it's really irresponsible to suggest that we shouldn't sell tickets to people, but equally I think places like Heathrow Airport need to understand that people will travel irrespective if they've got those plans, and they need to put things in place to mitigate the lengthy queues that we are likely to see.
I mean, this is an industry that's already on its knees. I mean, it crawled out of the pandemic, and now we have strikes chaos.
Yes, but we have an awful lot of strikes being solved at the moment. But it looks all very promising for the health sector. I appreciate junior doctors, maybe not. It looks like the trains will be back and running. I mean, what do people do if they're not paid enough money? The only thing that they've got in the armoury is to go on strike. And the one thing that has been shown about this is when the government turns around and says, no, we're not negotiating. Once the strikes happen, they start the negotiations, and then we actually solve the problem.
Yeah, but of course, I mean, this is going to be. There's nothing to do with the government in one.
No, this is private.
One.
No, that's
but
right.
It's interesting at the time when people do want to get back to it all. Demand is really building. Well, that's the time you're going to get some results by striking, isn't it?
Well,
to put it bluntly,
this is the one problem about when you decide to take strike action. There's no point having a strike that's ineffective.
Yeah.
So you then do have to hit people and put people out because of it.
Do you have any sympathy for that? Let us know. GBviews at gbnews.uk. Let's have a look at the Mail's looking at woke barristers. Nigel.
Indeed, they are, and this is a number of leading lawyers. You could call them woke, or you could call them liberal-minded, depending on your point of view.
Are you not a woke label fan?
Well, I mean, I don't see why woke should be a term of abuse. I think I'm probably quite woke, but I don't see that as being, abusive.
He'd like to call himself liberal, but I think there's a little bit of wokeness that creeps in.
Thank you very much over there. So a number of lawyers have said, right, that because of their consciences, they don't want to be around prosecuting climate activists. And it's people like Jolyon Morn, who we keep hearing of from the Good Law Project. And so the argument is, can a lawyer refuse to take on a case? Well, of course they can. I mean, lawyers can have a choice in that. And on the other hand, you also get lawyers who will take on a case pro bono or free on the basis they believe in the cause. I think that lawyers ought to have a right to decide either way which way they go.
Yeah, it's fair enough. It's why do they have to declare it, I guess?
And that's what feels wrong. If we're entitled to legal representation and a free and fair judicial system, for people to say that I don't agree with committing those people into the judicial system because it's a crime I quite support. Well, surely that's not for the judiciary to pass judgment on. It feels a little bit like that crime's OK, but something else won't. And I don't want to be taking lectures from Jolyon Morn, who clubbed a fox.
To death, yes.
I think it's wrong to bring your own sort of political beliefs into this. The law should be there. It should be free from emotion and just looked at.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, defence lawyers, I mean, again, you don't have to take on a case, but defence lawyers often defend people who they, may personally not think actually are innocent, but everyone has a right to a defence.
And everyone does have a right to defence. I mean, I think what we're talking about here is actually on the other side of the coin, which is the prosecution bit. And if you...
shouldn't they prosecute people who they don't actually believe has committed a crime?
Well, or if they're prosecuting climate activists, their argument is that they're on the side of the climate activists. They believe those climate activists are doing a good thing. And I think that a lawyer should be... Claire's got a very furrowed brow on this one.
Yeah,
that they should have the right to say, no, I'm sorry, that I believe in saving the environment, I believe in what these people are doing, I'm not going to prosecute them and put them in jail.
But it's how they've done it,
Yeah.
isn't it? That's the thing. It's not saying what they're fighting for is wrong.
Exactly,
How
and I
they've gone
think
about doing it.
if they have their own personal beliefs, that's absolutely fine. Everybody's entitled to do that. But to put it out there to say we won't be working on these cases, well, why tell people? What's the point? Do they want to have this argument? Because it's going to be one of those subjects then that gets picked up and people like us will discuss it, and then Parliament will get involved, and then it all gets out of hand. If they'd just done it quietly under the radar, they probably would have got away with it and nobody noticed. But I do think that if there is somebody who requires legal representation, that should be taken. You shouldn't make these judgments just because you think that climbing above the gantry of the M25 is fine. For the majority of people, it's not.
Yeah. No, interesting. Your thoughts on that as well, if you would, this morning.
Yeah, we've got time for one more. And Claire, this is a very interesting study, isn't it, in the Times about coffee drinkers. They're walking more.
Yes, and as a...
Some are.
Some are, at least.
An avid coffee drinker, I can quite appreciate that. It's quite interesting because one of the first thoughts was people were walking further to attend a certain coffee shop. They liked that coffee, so therefore they would walk further. But when receipts were analysed, actually that didn't stack up. Is it because you just got a burst of energy that you end up moving around more? I know that at work I will drink a lot of coffee and then I'm walking everywhere anyway. I might go to an extra coffee shop along the way, but I think it's one of these things that I'm not sure necessarily that it's the coffee doing 1,000 steps more for people. I think that sometimes you just move more because you feel like it. Now, whether the coffee has an increase in your mood and you feel like you want to move further, I'm not so sure about it. I mean, I'm quite happy to keep drinking the coffee and test that theory out. So if anybody would...
But you sleep less. You walk more but sleep less, according to this.
I also disagree with that.
On the sleep front. I mean, Claire makes the coffee in the morning, I make the coffee at night to take up to bed.
You have coffee to bed?
We have coffee at night. We have a latte at night, which we take up to bed.
Do you really?
That's my job to go and do, and we sleep like babies.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, I've reached a point. I used to drink caffeine quite late at night. Now, if I have one after about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm done.
Yeah.
Yes, and that's a friend of mine is exactly the same and can't drink it past sort of 2 in the afternoon, whereas I will just keep going. If I don't drink it, my sleep is affected more. So that's obviously, I think that's probably a caffeine withdrawal system. It does look like it. I think there are worse items that I could be addicted to.
There are worse things to be addicted to.
Yes, I wouldn't worry about it too much. Claire, Nigel, we've got to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed. You can go and battle out these. It's nice when you both disagree, so...
Oh, I love it, yeah. Very good.
Oh, yeah.
Go have a coffee in the green room.
Yes, argue it out.
And go have an argument, yeah. We like it, don't we?
We do. Now, the Prince of Wales has spent his last day of his surprise trip to Poland with young Ukrainian refugees.
Yes, the future king travelled to Warsaw on Wednesday to thank British and Polish troops for helping those fleeing the war-torn country.
Well, our royal reporter, Cameron Walker, is in the Polish capital and has this report.
Prince William on a mission to strengthen solidarity. At the tomb of the unknown soldier in Warsaw, the future king laid a wreath echoing his grandmother, the late Queen, in 1996. Past wars have not brought present-day peace. Ukraine is still fighting the Russian invasion. The prince was determined to shine a light on the plight of Ukrainian refugees who've been forced to flee their homeland. Alexandra was working as a lawyer in Kyiv, but when Russian tanks barged across the border, that all changed.
In one day, of course, I lost everything. We was going through some forests, through some roads where was tanks already going, and we was even not sure it was Ukrainian or already Russian tanks. And we was seeing these tanks and understanding that, you know, it was very risky to go out from Kyiv actually at that moment. And many people decided to stay, but I decided to risk.
Since the war started, 8 million have been displaced. 1.5 million have found sanctuary in Poland, the nation who's taken in the most refugees by far. In a trendy Warsaw food hall, dressed in casual clothes, Prince William spent time listening to the stories of many young Ukrainians who fled the fighting. The Prince spoke of his gratitude for the Polish community supporting refugees during a meeting with their president and reiterated what William described as the profound relationship shared between our two countries. Polish royal fans travelled miles to catch a glimpse of His Royal Highness.
It's fantastic. We didn't expect that such a person would come here and show this support for the Polish nation, for the Ukrainian nation, which is very needed now.
The timing of the royal visit comes the same week as China's President Xi was in Moscow for a unifying state visit, invited by President Putin. But royal cement is setting. William's power of soft diplomacy has confirmed an invitation for the Polish president to his father's coronation. Two NATO allies strengthening their bond. Cameron Walker, GB News, Warsaw.
Fascinating to see him out and about.
Yeah.
I think he's coming into his own.
He really is, and he's so adored by the crowds as well. Even in Poland, there were people queuing and waiting to see him and holding flags. It really is lovely to see. It's very popular.
Yeah, I like him.
The Prince of Wales, yes,
I
doing
do
a good job.
like him. We were talking about TB earlier on. Francis has been in touch. Excuse me, Francis.
Oh, dear.
Anyway, Francis says, I think farmers will be very miffed that you did not deal with TB in the countryside, as per the infection of cattle by things like badgers and deer, costing livelihoods and costing the UK millions in compensation. I totally get your point. TB is a very big problem for farmers. However, we were talking TB in humans. That was the point of our conversation. TB in cattle is a totally different subject. And, you know, it's a different area. But I understand, I mean, I'm from a farming community. I understand exactly the impact this has. I mean, it's devastating if you get a TB infection in cattle and they get rid of slaughter the entire herd and all the rest of it. It's awful. So it's a fair point, but it wasn't really the area that we're talking about.
Yeah, and he makes the point too about the mental distress that has for farmers.
Terrible,
of course, if you have an outbreak in your farmers, it must be so stressful. Phil's been in touch saying, I got TB at the start of the pandemic. Fortunately, these days there is treatment for it. Dr. Anita Raja was telling us it's just a course of antibiotics, isn't it? So in this country, it is quite easy to treat, thankfully. He goes on to say TB was all but eradicated in the UK, but says immigration brought it back.
Well,
I'm not sure about that, but there are places around the world where it still is a massive killer, and that's what we're talking about on World TB Day. Should we be investing globally in order to eradicate it across the globe?
Belle is in the Scottish Highlands. Oh, how lovely. I'm 33, skipped the queue for my TB jab because I was scared of needles at school. 2 years ago, I found I had latent TB, so it was laying dormant in me.
Oh.
Dear me. But I didn't have the jab at school, but that's because, you know, you had the little ring thing, and mine came up. So it's like I'd already had immunity.
Oh, well, that's very good.
How? I've no idea. But anyway, that was the thing, apparently. GB Views at GB News. For any of your thoughts, we'd love to hear from you this morning. We've got all your top stories coming up straight after the weather.
Good morning, I'm Alex Deakin, and this is your latest weather from the Met Office. Some sunshine today, but there will be plenty more heavy showers as well, and a fairly gusty wind, especially across the south. That's where the isobars are closest. This area of low pressure has been dominating our weather for much of this week, and it's just going to throw more showers our way. Having said that, it is generally a bright, fine start for quite a few, certainly across much of the Midlands, eastern and southern England. Got a bit of sunshine around, but the shower clouds will start to bubble up and they'll get going quite widely by late morning and into the early afternoon. Some heavy showers in places, thunderstorms are possible. They will tend to move through on the brisk breeze, certainly across England and Wales, but frequent showers for Northern Ireland, some quite heavy, slow-moving showers across central and northern Scotland. In the sunny spells, temperatures getting up into the teens once more, 14, 15 across the southeast, generally 10 to 12 Celsius, but feeling cooler when the showers come along. Lots of showers, quite a wet evening this evening for Northern Ireland and southwest Scotland. Elsewhere, again, the showers continuing to whiz by through the night, leading into a showery start to the weekend. It will be, again, Reasonably mild, with temperatures mostly 6s and 7s across central areas, maybe 7 or 8 further south, but turning colder across northern parts, with fresher air moving in during the weekends. Initially across northern Scotland, plenty of showers still across southern Scotland, northeast England tomorrow morning. Gradually easing here, and elsewhere not as many showers. Better chance of a drier day for Wales and southern England and across northern Scotland, although here, as I mentioned, it is turning colder. Temperatures struggling somewhat. Still double digits to maybe teens elsewhere, but that colder air is going to win out as one area of low pressure moves away. This one will bring some more wet weather across the south, but as that clears on Saturday night, the colder conditions drop more widely across the country for Sunday. Goodbye.
We've got a brand new lineup every Saturday night on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Brand new Saturday nights on GB News, Britain's news channel.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The people's channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel. Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Around half of you say the investigation into Boris Johnson over Partygate is fair.
Good morning to you. It's 7 o'clock on Friday, the 24th of March. This is Breakfast on GB News with Stephen and Ellie. These are your top stories.
We've got the results of the latest GB News People's Poll as we deliver your verdict on Boris Johnson and how you view the Metropolitan Police in the wake of the Casey report.
The Bank of England's governor says he has a more optimistic view of the economy despite the decision to raise interest rates. The move, of course, has left hundreds of thousands of homeowners facing mortgage rates, some more than 8%. Banks now under pressure to offer more support.
We'll be speaking to the Shadow Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, about Labour's solution to the growing waiting times for cancer treatment on the NHS. We'll also get his reaction to the release of Sir Keir Starmer's tax returns.
The trial of Oscar winner Gwyneth Paltrow continues today, with the Hollywood star accused of crashing into a man skiing in 2016. She denies blame for the crash and has countersued.
And as ever, you can join in any of our discussions this morning by emailing us, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet us at GBNews. Lots of you have been getting in touch, and we're going to share them throughout the programme.
I'm going to talk about AI a little bit later on.
Are we?
Because, well, yes, just because it's on the front of the Daily Star this morning. Have killer machines taken over the world?
He's very into this story.
No is the answer to that. It's absolute twaddle.
You're very stressed about it, aren't you?
I'm very stressed about it because it's all about AI, and we talk about things like Alexa and things being AI. They're not. AI
Not
is
yet.
when something can think absolutely independently, and that doesn't exist in the computer world yet.
Yeah.
Concerns when it does, but it doesn't exist yet. So what's this all about?
But is it where we're heading? I
Well, it's
think
where we're
so.
heading.
They're getting very intelligent, aren't they?
Well, no, not yet. That's the thing.
They're
not.
on their way, though.
They're just
They're on their way.
responding. They're just responding to programming, a little bit like me. Anyway, if you've got any thoughts on that, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Now, let's kick off with our latest GB News People's poll. And we've asked people to give their verdict on Boris Johnson with that inquiry and the Metropolitan Police following a controversial week for both.
Yes, regarding the former Prime Minister, 48% of people thought that the investigation into his alleged misleading of Parliament was fair, while only 11% thought the inquiry was unfair.
And the poll also showed 45% of you have a negative view of the Metropolitan Police following the release of the Casey report, just 10% having a positive view.
Well, joining us now is the former Special Advisor to Michael Gove, Charlie Rowley. Good morning to you, Charlie.
Morning.
Let's start with the Privileges Committee investigation into Boris Johnson. It's been leading the headlines this week. 48% of respondents in this poll said that they believe it's fair. Did that surprise you?
It doesn't surprise me because, as I say, I don't know who had the time to watch the whole committee, but I did. I've got enough time on my hands. And I thought it was fair, and I thought it showed the best of Parliament, actually. It showed MPs doing their job when they sit on these select committees. You leave your party political beliefs at the door, and it was a cross-party committee. And I think Boris Johnson did get the interrogation that was required to get to the bottom of whether he knowingly and recklessly misled Parliament. Now, there's a few exchanges that need to take place. He will write to the committee again. The committee will want to make sure that they've got all the evidence that they need. And Boris Johnson will want to supply as much evidence as possible to clear his name. But I think for that session that we saw on Wednesday, it was thorough, it was very investigative, and I think it was fair, yes.
Yeah, I mean, because it's interesting, the poll isn't asking whether you think Boris Johnson is guilty of recklessly misleading Parliament, it's just whether the investigation is fair, and the hearings were fair this week, which is a whole different process. It's about acknowledging the benefit of the process, isn't it, rather than the result?
I think so, and I think I know there was a lot of conversation earlier on in the week about whether it should have been televised or not, and there was, a worry that this is just going to, blow things out of the water even more. But
These things are always televised, aren't they? It's not like it was specially televised.
You're absolutely right. Committees are televised. I think there was just so much hype attached to this one, and I think maybe there was some suggestion that because of it being Boris Johnson and it was people out to get him, that it could have been done behind closed doors. But I think the fact that the television cameras were there and it was broadcast across many channels meant that everybody had to be on their best behaviour and to demonstrate just how fair that select committee, that Privileges Committee had to be.
Yeah. I mean, as you say, Boris Johnson will want to clear his name because there is a lot riding on this, isn't it? If he is found to have misled Parliament knowingly or recklessly, it could end his political career, couldn't it?
It could, and the Privileges Committee will have to decide what punishment they think is appropriate, and that can range from a couple of days. If it is a 10-day suspension from the House of Commons, that will be something that the whole of the House of Commons will have to vote on, and that might trigger a by-election in his own constituency in Uxbridge. And so that could be something, given the way that the polls fluctuate at the moment, Labour are ahead, it seems, in that seat, and it could be a bit of a demise for Boris.
But that'd never get through the Commons, would it?
I think it's unlikely. I think people, even if they feel he has misled Parliament, as I say, with intent and recklessly, then I think at best he'll see a couple of days suspension. But I think what people want really is this story, A, to move on, and certainly for the Conservative Party, they don't want to keep hearing about Boris Johnson or divisions within the Conservative Party in the headlines. They want to move on and continue to demonstrate the positives of what the government's doing.
He does still have a lot of support, though, doesn't he? Especially for people who voted for him in the 2019 election and see him as an election winner. I mean, we've got an email in from Tony this morning who says, I think Boris will be back. You heard it first from me. Is that possible, Charlie? Do you think we could see Boris back as leader of the Conservative Party?
Well, I think, I sympathise with Tony. I mean, look, Boris Johnson has got, excuse me, huge talents. He's a brilliant communicator. Back in 2019, he was able to reach right across the country into parts where no other politician has been able to do. Seats in the Red Wall were won, I think, on the back of getting Brexit done, but because you had a charismatic leader and someone that was prepared to ruffle feathers where it needed to be done. Having said that, he was Prime Minister for 3.5 years, where 50 ministers resigned on his watch, where the party has, I'm afraid, slid down in the polls because of a number of scandals that took place under his watch. And I think, look, there is always a place for Boris Johnson, I think, in public life. Whether that's becoming Prime Minister again, I think that moment's passed.
Yes. Yeah, well, interesting. Let's have a look at the Met Police then, should we? Because our poll on that is pretty grim reading. Though I'll tell you what struck me as we're talking about it, because, I mean, the poll is conducted across the UK and what have you. Although the Met Police is getting very negative press at the moment, and 45% of the public say they have a negative view of the Metropolitan Police, according to our poll, is it slightly different? If you're not in the London metropolitan area and you're being asked about a police force which isn't yours, it's easier to have a negative view, isn't it?
I think so. I think that's absolutely right. And that's on the back of the number of stories that we've heard about the Metropolitan Police, so whether that was Wayne Couzens in relation to the Sarah Everard case in Clapham, or David Carrick, who have really obviously let the force down and brought it into a negative light. Because of the way in which these rogue officers have behaved. They have fallen way below the standard of duty of what's expected of anybody that puts on that uniform. And I do feel for police officers right across the country. If you're not part of the Metropolitan Police, the idea of being a police officer, you get lumped into this view that you're all bad apples. It isn't the case, because I always hope and think that the majority of people, as I say, that put on that uniform, that get up every day, that pound the streets to protect all of us and to keep us safe, by and large, are good, hard-working and honest people like most people in public service. But because you have these systemic problems in one particular service that does need to change, and I hope that Sir Mark Rowley can really get a grip of this, that you hope that once those changes take place and once you see the Metropolitan Police Service reform, that will have an impact on the trust that people are expressing, and I hope it can get better.
Just a quick word, Charlie, on Labour's lead, still ahead by 21 points. But Tories are closing in behind them, 22% this week. That has been lower. That has been lower in recent weeks. Do you think Rishi Sunak has enough time to potentially turn this around, turn the tables in terms of a general election?
I think he does, and I think, as I mentioned before, there was another poll last week, the Delta poll, which only put the Tories 10 points behind.
Only. It's ridiculous.
It is, but with a year or so to go, you never know. And I think what the government has to do, and what Rishi has demonstrated over the last couple of weeks, is just about delivery. So, signing the deal with France to stop the small boats, getting the Windsor framework through to get Brexit done finally. If he can get on top of the NHS backlogs. I mean, we've signed, Steve Barclay has got a good deal with some of the unions to prevent more strikes taking place in the NHS. And if you start to see the economy take a turn for the better, then he's achieving everything that he set out to do. He'll be seen as a man that can deliver for the country, that delivers on what he sees as the people's priorities, and people are looking at this government again when they might not have been last year, amongst all the chaos and turmoil. They're seeing Rishi Sunak lead a government that can get things done, that can get this country going, and will give him another go.
Well, we shall see, won't we? We shall see. It's a long hill to climb, is that one, though?
Yeah.
Got to be honest. Charlie Rowley, as always, good to see you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much. Thank you.
OK, let's bring you up to date with what else is going on today. And protesters in France have set fire to buildings as demonstrations continue over government plans to raise the pension age. Firefighters attended the blaze at Bordeaux Town Hall late last night. Its cause is still being determined. It's the 9th day of nationwide protests against the French president's pension reforms.
The BBC says the filming of Top Gear's latest series will not continue after Freddie Flintoff's crash. The former cricketer taken to hospital after being involved in an accident while filming for the show in December in Surrey. The corporation have apologised to Freddie and say they'll continue to support him with his recovery.
Tourists will be allowed to stand for the first time in the exact spot where the King will be crowned in a new display in Westminster Abbey, but they will have to wear socks. Specially guided barefoot tours will include access to the Cosmati pavement, which is usually closed off to the public. The display opens on April the 12th and is included in entry to the Abbey. And Margaret from Yorkshire's been in touch on that. Good morning to you, Margaret. She says, you mentioned the public viewing of the coronation site. I do hope that precautions are taken with those people who like to protest and throw paint and baked beans, for example. It's a good point, yes. And I'm sure that will be looked at. Security will be very, very high.
Yeah, you should think
around
so.
all of the coronation
You should
celebrations.
Think so. Why do they call it a barefoot tour, though?
When you have to wear socks.
When you have to wear socks. I don't know.
It's a shoeless tour.
It's a shoeless. That'd be better. That'd be better. Lee, good morning to you, Lee. So Lee, Trevor and Guzmo, our dog, are lying in bed watching you with a coffee this morning. Good, well, watching us with a coffee, I should say. Good morning to you,
Good
all
morning,
three.
Lee. Are you doing more steps, Lee, if you drink coffee?
He's lying in bed at the minute.
Well, he's not. Are you going for a walk later, Lee? Let us know.
Yeah.
It's a study in the Times. Coffee drinkers, apparently, walking 1,000 more steps a day than non-coffee drinkers. Now, is that because you're caffeinated and you've got all this energy? Or is it because you're walking further for your coffee? Let us know. Very interesting.
And we're talking, obviously, about the whole Boris Johnson thing and whether people mislead Parliament or not, because it is, it's a very serious thing. Stephen says, are you really suggesting every MP who stands up in Parliament is telling the truth? No, we're not. But I think there's a difference between maybe spinning your way out of things or whether you deliberately mislead Parliament, which is because they're voting on things and, it's where the law of the land is set. So I think it's slightly different if you're just standing up and proffering a view on something, which may or may not be right. But I get your point.
Yeah.
I get your point.
And Alison's been in touch saying the advisers need to be held to account. What twaddle? Boris Johnson was the big boss. He knew the rules. He made them and was telling them to us every single day. The buck stops with him. End of.
Though isn't it interesting, because it did reach a point, I'm not trying to defend Boris Johnson, but it did reach a point. I remember saying on air at the time, what are the rules today? What are the rules anymore? Because they reached a point where they were changing so often.
Every few weeks, wouldn't it?
And it's like, I reached a point where I didn't really quite know exactly what I could and couldn't do. I remember it was someone's birthday and I drove down to their house and, I didn't go in. I just left a present on the door and rang the doorbell and then waved at them and then walked away again. Yeah. But then someone said, oh, no, you're not meant to be driving anywhere. It was only like 3 miles down the road.
Yeah.
It's like, well,
it was easy done at some of these times.
Is that breaking the rules or not? I have no idea. I didn't think I was.
Yeah. First lockdown, you couldn't meet anybody, and then it changed to one person for exercise, didn't it? And then it was great. There was a lot of change, and I think there are some people out there who would say, inside Number 10, they were in there every single day. They were working from the office. They were working in teams. They were all there. You could perhaps see why the lines would be blurred. Let us know what you think. gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Oh, do you care anymore? I did say, actually, last week when we mentioned it, and I said, do people really care? And someone got in touch who was a nurse and said, well, yes, we do care. We watch people die. And I understand that. If you're on if you're working on that sort of front line. But I just mean for the general public, do we need to keep dragging it out? And I'm not entirely convinced about that, but...
It so depends on your experience in the pandemic, though, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, if you couldn't get to see your loved one in a care home, you couldn't hold their hand as they died, you would care.
Yeah.
If Boris Johnson knew he shouldn't have been at a party with his colleagues and he intentionally misled Parliament, they would care.
Yeah.
It does depend, doesn't it? Keep your views coming in. gbviews@gbnews.uk.
That's what I like. Everybody's perspective is different,
Yeah.
which is important to reflect.
Yeah,
I
and
think.
to do it politely as well, which is
Oh,
what we do
yes.
here. It's what we specialise in. We even have our husband and wife team, Nigel Nelson and Claire Pearsall, who don't always agree, do they?
They do not.
But when they don't, they do it very politely, and it's
They do.
often very amusing.
Well, we hope they do. I'll be yelling their heads off out there. Who knows? We'll find out in about 20 minutes' time. Now, the Office for National Statistics retail figures for February have just been announced, and it's some positive news. Retail sales volumes grew by 1.2% last month, building on a growth of just under 1% in January.
Retail expert Jeremy Baker is here with us now to go through the figures. Good morning to you, Jeremy. So this is positive news this morning, isn't it? I mean, we're heading in the right direction, which is up.
Yes, things are getting better, slightly better, and some of the figures are slightly down, but generally things are getting better. People like shopping, they like possessions, they like dressing up. And, the whole retail thing really fits in with the consumer psychology. The difficulty for retail is it's in the front line of the anti-inflation. And so the Governor of the Bank of England takes away consumer money and with the interest rates, takes away the consumer spending power, and that impacts the industry, the retail industry, makes their life incredibly difficult. And it's interesting to see how they respond. Some are responding absolutely brilliantly, like Aldi and Lidl, by really simplifying retail, simplifying things, cutting prices the whole time. Primark, absolutely wonderful, booming like mad. Other people are kind of thinking, well, if retail is so difficult, maybe we should be doing something else. And that's the interesting idea from John Lewis Partnership. She says, Sharon Wright, the head, says that maybe they should think of going into something else as well, which would be renting out property. So you'd go to John Lewis for food, for clothes, and also maybe renting a flat. And the difficulty there is everyone has been attacking her. Don't touch John Lewis Partnership, the model. It goes back to when? Is it Shakespeare's time? I can't remember. It's part of Britain's history. You can't do anything with it. And so just leave it alone. It's brilliant. Unfortunately, retail is under attack. It is difficult. It must constantly reinvent itself. And that's what Sharon White of John Lewis is trying to do. Yeah. And getting really attacked on all sides for her pains. Shame.
I am intrigued by this, Jeremy, in the sense that when I was saying, it's good news, 1.2% increase in retail sales. But I mean, yes, good news for retailers, but it's not necessarily good news for the economy, is it? Because as you said, the whole reason that the Bank of Interest raised the base rate yesterday is to try to stop us spending more money in this sector, yes, because that's driving inflation.
Yes. I thought before I looked into it, the Governor of the Bank of England was really crafty in trying to cut prices. For example, getting more foreign workers coming into the fields and pick crops so that we had more crop, more food, and prices would go down. He doesn't. All he's doing is going, like tomorrow morning, Saturday, standing outside a shopping mall and saying, do not go in there, keep away, you're not supposed to shop, I don't want you to shop. That's his whole policy, can be summarised as an attack on shopping. And it's not very nice if you're in the industry. I personally don't think it's a very clever way to run the economy. But, they're the bigger people in the economic system than retail. So that's the way things go.
Jeremy, we're talking a lot at the moment about food inflation as well. I mean, some items like oil and pasta, they're up 60%, sometimes even more. But food store sales volumes rose by 0.9% in February 2023. That's very interesting, isn't it? That's so despite this high inflation in food, we're buying more of it.
Yes. Well, Christmas is a time of letting go, and then you never sort of come back after Christmas. You try to economise, but I don't find that you do actually. You just carry on spending and enjoying. The thing about retail is, on the negative side, you've got the Governor of Bank of England saying, stop buying, just go away from the shops. And at the same time, the consumer is thinking, wow, I love these biscuits are absolutely delicious. This shirt is wonderful. I must get another one. So the consumer psychology is pushing more, buy. And the governor is saying, no, stop. And it's a kind of battle between these two forces. And in February, in my opinion anyway, the good people had a little bit of a moment when they pushed things forward.
Look, really interesting to talk to you, Jeremy. Thanks very much indeed. Really appreciate it. And I wonder, because we're talking food store volumes, is it that people are spending more, buying more, or is it that they're spending more, or is it that they're buying more because it's cheaper?
Yes, and I think it's the latter. I think people are eating out less, buying from the shops more.
I only think because I was in the supermarket only yesterday, and I noticed it was just an ordinary brand of bread. I can't remember which one it was, but an ordinary brand of bread, £2 a loaf.
Really?
It was. So I bought the supermarket's own, which was 85p. Yeah. And so I bought 2 and put 1 in the freezer.
Good for you.
But you sort of think, does that mean... So it's an increase in volume on what I would have bought, but it ultimately saved me money.
But it's the way we're shopping is different, and that's exactly what you're saying. People look at their prices more. I mean, I'm doing it as well. Look at your prices more, and you might buy differently. Our behaviours are changing, but it doesn't necessarily mean we're buying less. We're just buying differently. I mean, even with clothes, it's discount department stores that are doing really, really well. And perhaps the higher-end brands are struggling more. It's cost living, isn't it? We're all adapting.
We are all adapting, and you wonder whether people will then go back to the brand. Is that the other thing about pop? You drink a lot of pop.
What, like fizzy pop?
Fizzy pop.
Yeah.
But you imagine your big brand. You know the brand I'm talking about. The brand. It's what I always bought. And I can't remember how much it is for a 2-litre bottle now.
It's quite a lot, yeah.
£2 odd, maybe nearly £3 now. Whereas the supermarket's own 90p. So we're buying.
And
the
does it taste
own.
okay?
But it's different. We buy the lime and lemon crush or the whatever.
Yeah.
Whatever they've got, dandelion and burdock, all that sort of stuff. Which is obviously and sugar free. But the point is, if things balance out and we have more pounds in our pocket, will I go back to buying?
Will you ever go back
real
to
thing
the
or not?
Big brands, yeah, because they're a lot more expensive. Yeah. Let us know what you think. Are you changing the way you shop? Are you shopping differently? Are you buying food in a different way? Let us know. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Interesting.
I could talk about shopping all day.
Me too.
Because people think, you just buy what you want, but you don't anymore. I really fancied, I'm on a diet, I'm permanently on a blooming diet, but I really fancied...
Very hard on himself.
I saw some spicy nuts.
Oh, yeah.
And I thought, I might treat myself to them. And I grabbed them and I scanned them, beep, beep, beep. And it turns out, and then when I'd looked on the thing, thought they were £3.
And you thought, no.
So I de-scanned them.
You put them back, did you?
But I'm not spending £3 on a bag of nuts.
Oh, dear.
Can you imagine?
Well, you deserve a treat. You deserve
not for £3.
No, you don't deserve that much for a treat, no.
No. Anyway, so that's what I'm doing. What are you doing? gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Now, stay with us. Got plenty more to come. We'll be discussing a campaign for paid leave after a pregnancy very sadly ends in miscarriage. That's after this.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
all sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely
Right.
stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton Tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere. Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News. The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories, controversies and issues.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
It's 5 times the opinion, 5 times the debate, and 5 times the fun. The Saturday 5. Saturday nights from 8.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
You could wink at the end. I can't Britain's
wink.
listening.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
$7:29. Very good morning to you. You're watching and listening to Breakfast on GB News with Stephen and Derek.
Still lots more to come on the programme, including 22,000 patients have been waiting over 2 months to start cancer treatment on the NHS. That's according to new figures. We'll be talking to the Shadow Health Secretary in just a few minutes.
The former Foreign Secretary, Lord Owen, has said the UK should stay out of negotiations to end the war in Ukraine. We'll ask him why. That's just after 8 o'clock.
And do keep your views coming in, gbnews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet us at gbnews.
Now, a quarter of pregnancies end in loss, and today Parliament's expecting to hear the second reading of the Paid Miscarriage Leave Bill.
Yes, it's a bill introduced by SNP MP Angela Crawley that seeks to grant 3 days of statutory paid leave to parents who experience a miscarriage before 24 weeks of pregnancy.
Now, currently, paid bereavement leave is only provided following stillbirth after 6 months into the pregnancy.
Well, I went to meet one of the campaigners for the bill, Keely Langthorne. She lost her son, George, when she was 5.5 months pregnant. She calls the bill George's Law.
George Langthorne was born sleeping at 22 weeks.
George was a baby. He only weighed 1 pound when he was born, but he had blonde hair, big feet. Fuck me. He was a fully formed baby. We got to dress him and bathe him and photograph him and cuddle him. And yeah, but for anyone going through an experience of birth, it's terrifying anyway, especially the first time. But to know that you're going through a birth and that your baby's not going to survive is horrendous.
Because George was born at 24 weeks, Keely was not entitled to paid miscarriage leave. Luckily, the law firm she works for allowed her 6 weeks off to grieve. But Keely was aware that other parents were not in the same fortunate position.
The law says you go back to work at 9 o'clock the next day. So for instance, I left George at the mortuary on a Thursday night, and the law says that I go back to work at 9 o'clock the next day. There's no way I could have done that. I just physically had a baby. Mentally, I was grieving the loss of my son. I don't know how anyone in their right mind would think that it's okay to say to someone, go back to work the next day, you'll be all right. Or take it as sick leave. But this isn't sick leave. It isn't sick leave, it is an annual leave.
Keely is now campaigning for a change in the law, which would give a statutory 3 days of paid miscarriage leave for a loss at any time in the pregnancy. She's calling it George's Law.
We are now in 2023 where all we talk about is well-being and equality and diversity. But I don't see how any firm can say that they promote equality and diversity if they haven't got a baby loss policy in place.
1 in 4 pregnancies end in miscarriage. Under current legislation, workers are entitled to 2 weeks of paid bereavement leave following a stillbirth after 24 weeks of pregnancy. But for parents who experience a loss after less than 24 weeks, they must rely on either unpaid or sick leave if they feel unable to return to work after a loss. Ruth Bender-Attic is the director of the Miscarriage Association.
Yes, we do support the bill, and we support it strongly, and we've been talking with Angela Crawley about it for quite some time. First of all, they'd have at least a little bit of time to begin to recover from the kind of physical and emotional impact of miscarriage or ectopic pregnancy. It would really go a long way in recognising and acknowledging even these tiniest of lives, which for most people, the minute they have a positive pregnancy test, they're already thinking and planning and dreaming about.
We asked the government to respond to this call for George's Law, but nobody was available for interview. They gave us this statement. Miscarriage is a very personal experience, and some of those affected may want to stay at home, while others may prefer to continue to work or alternatively may need time off later. The government believes that individuals are best placed to understand their own specific needs, and good employers will respond to requests made by their employees in a sensitive way. Keely says she will still continue to fight for George's Law. Ellie Costello, GB News.
Well, we can speak now to one of our producers here at GB News and registered midwife Lizzie Romaine. Good morning to you, Lizzie. Thank you for joining us. So, as we just heard there, the way the law currently stands is if you're under 6 months or 24 weeks pregnant, if you have a miscarriage in the evening, you have to be in work the next morning by law. What would the benefits be, do you think, of having a statutory paid leave for somebody who experiences a loss?
I just think, well, I can't actually say express opinions because I am still a registered midwife as well, but all I know is as soon as a woman gets a positive pregnancy test, in their mind, they are pregnant and they are having a baby. So, losing a baby, even if it is in like 6 weeks, 7 weeks, 8 weeks, it's a big thing for them. They've already prepared in their mind to have a baby. They've already thought about going into the hospital. They've told people about their pregnancy. They might even have started preparing a nursery in their minds. So actually going through a miscarriage, even at a really, really early stage, is still a big life event for them. So to be able to have some recognised time off is, why not?
But yeah, I suppose you have to ask why. And your points are absolutely valid. Of course they are. But don't you have to ask, why is there a need for this to be put into law in the sense that, can you imagine an employer who would not allow you some time off after having a miscarriage?
It's going to be hard anyway, I think, because even in society today, there are quite a lot of women that find it difficult to go to their employer anyway and say, I'm trying for a baby, because, there are still certain organisations out there that might see women negatively, because obviously if you're trying to go for a promotion, if you're going to go off for maternity leave, that's going to be a cost to a company. So a lot of women actually might find it quite difficult to go to their employer in the first place and say, look, I'm pregnant, or look, I'm going through a miscarriage. So I guess if it is in law, then maybe it will make things slightly easier. Whether women will actually take that up or not is another matter.
But it is that point, isn't it, about making that conversation easier, because talking about miscarriage, sadly, is still very taboo, isn't it?
It is, and 1 in 4 women will actually come through and have a miscarriage. And I mean, I worked in an antenatal clinic for a good 5-6 years, and the number of women who would be coming in with a miscarriage, either pre-having a live baby or maybe in between. There are so many, and it's so untalked about still in society, and every single person that comes through with a miscarriage always seems to think like, you know, they're in the minority, and actually it's just because we don't talk about it enough and it's just not recognised.
What's it like for, I mean, in terms of later pregnancies, I mean, as a midwife, do people sort of have time to come in and then they're still going through that birthing process, as it were, with a miscarriage?
Yeah, so obviously it depends on the gestation of the baby, of the fetus, as to how big it is. But, you know, you're either talking a very early miscarriage will look like a small bundle of cells, so it might be, you know, kind of yay big. But, you know, if you're talking anything past sort of 12 weeks, that fetus is formed, you know, you can see a body, hands, legs, you know, and especially coming up to 24 weeks. I mean, some babies will survive at 24 weeks. They will be born and they will be on a ventilator and they'll be in the neonatal intensive care unit, but they will survive at 24 weeks. So to have a baby that soon, you know, up to 24 weeks, if you had a baby at 23 weeks and you weren't given any time off, it's, you know,
there's a physical recovery there as well.
It's physical recovery as well. You know, it's not only emotional, it's a very physically, you know, taxing process on a woman, and they'll still be bleeding, and, you know, without going into it, there's a lot more going on. You know, even women will start to lactate as well, you know, after a miscarriage sometimes, and they've also got that to deal with.
Yeah, which adds to the mental pressure,
yes,
I guess.
Yeah.
Lizzie, good to talk to you this morning.
Thank
you very much indeed.
Lizzie.
If you've got a thought on that, it'd be interesting to hear from you. gbnews@gbnews.uk.
Yeah, I learnt a lot working on that, actually. I wasn't aware that that's the way that law currently stands.
No, I didn't know.
And it is complicated. It's a really complicated issue. In terms, there are some women who wouldn't take the leave, even if they were given those 3 days. They'd want to get back to work. They'd want to be busy. And other women, like Healy, who you just heard from there, it was physically gruelling, her labour with George, and she couldn't have possibly, she said, gone into work the next day. She needed that time off work. Let us know what you think. gbnews@gbnews.uk. There is that second reading in Parliament today. Could become law, but currently it is still a bill and it's being debated. So it's an interesting topic to talk about.
Yeah,
yeah, 1 in 4 pregnancies end in loss.
I had no idea it was that high.
Really high.
Actually. Anyway, look, we've got lots still to come for you this morning, including all the newspapers, so don't go anywhere.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "No, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island's story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
"7:42, good morning to you. This is Breakfast with Stephen and Ellie.
Time to go through the papers now, and joining us this morning is husband and wife team, political editor of Sunday Mirror and Sunday People, Nigel Nelson, and Claire Pearsall, a former Conservative advisor. Good morning to you both. Nigel, let's start with you, shall we? In the Telegraph, really sad story of a head teacher taking her own life in the wake of an Ofsted inspection. And it's now opened the door, hasn't it, for the scrapping of one-word school ratings, such as outstanding. Or...
That's basically it. I mean, obviously, this was a huge tragedy. And where we get to is that the Chief Inspector of Ofsted, Amanda Spielman, is saying that she'll have a look at the way that they do it. The tricky bit, obviously, is that how you actually do it simply for parents to be able to decide on schools. So there are only four sections: outstanding, good, requires improvement, or inadequate. And this head teacher appears to have killed herself because her school was downgraded from outstanding to inadequate.
Can I just make a point on this? Because I've been thinking about this since this story, and there's been so much pressure on Ofsted as a result of what tragically has happened to this lady. I remember talking to people at the Samaritans a lot of years ago now, but they're saying you've got to be very careful with suicide. Suicide is not triggered by one event. And so Ofsted can't be blamed for this. There's clearly been a culmination of things which have led to this tragedy.
I think that's absolutely right. That obviously that it's a complex process, and as you say, it can't be down to one thing. And so but the education unions are demanding that Ofsted inspections stop because of this one case. Now, Claire and myself have been disagreeing about this all the way up into the studio this morning. My view is that Ofsted shouldn't suspend inspections. I think it's important they carry on. Nobody likes their regulator. I mean, it's it is one of those things. But if you're going to have the process, certainly review whether it's the best way of doing it. But no, don't cancel inspections while that review is going on.
Claire, why do you think they should?
I think they need to suspend them for the moment because I think the process doesn't work. And what we can see, and you're right, in this case, there were going to be a number of other factors. But my mother was a teacher for many, many years, and I've been through the Ofsted process with her at a primary school. The amount of stress that is piled on a school for a very short period of time is ridiculous. They are there, they are trying to teach the children, they are trying to go about doing all of the rest of their duties and deal with all of the paperwork that they have. To then have this extra paperwork, extra stress, being looked at, being judged, I think the process does we need to look at it and understand what it is there for, because unfortunately it has turned into such a tick box exercise that Ofsted go in. Any school could suddenly prepare beautiful paperwork. It's not going to mean that the quality of the teaching or the quality of the safeguarding or the quality of the management is in line with how it should be.
But they are watching... I mean, my mother was a primary school teacher, and you're right, the Ofsted is stressful. But isn't it necessary to safeguard the children, to make sure that they are getting the education they need?
But if a school is then deemed to be outstanding, it's not then looked at for another 4 years. So there's nothing to say that that outstanding school couldn't, in 6 months' time, fall down, fall through the cracks and then become worse, and just because no one's looking. I think Ofsted need to re-evaluate what their part in all of this is. Now, if it is to drive up standards, absolutely brilliant. I think everybody would support that. But try doing these things on an annual or biannual basis or something else. Let's look at each school. Let's look at the children. Let's look at the communities. Let's look at the other work that they do, because it's not all just results on a piece of paper. I don't think you can judge schools like that. And anyone that has put a child through education, you go into a school and, yes, you can look at what Ofsted have said, but you also get a feeling when you meet the students, when you meet the teachers, when you walk around a place, you get a feeling for it. And having done that in schools, you know, I've done that for primary and I've done that for secondary, you get a feel for somewhere. And it doesn't mean they're necessarily the best on everything, but it's the best fit for your child. So, yes, there is a point to having a regulator, absolutely, but I think they need to re-evaluate what it is they do, what it is they're for, and how much stress this puts on the teaching profession.
What do you make of that then, Nigel? Because I'm a daughter of two parents. So there's two parents, two teachers. And, you know, I've seen, similar to what you're talking about, Claire, the stress that consumed both of my parents when Ofsted inspectors came around. And it is that intensive prep, but you get that call, don't you, saying Ofsted's coming in tomorrow, the day after. And it's those 2 days of intensive prep and then 2 days, usually, of being inspected, and it is everything. It's very intensive.
Yes,
do you think that should be looked at?
Well, I think the system should be looked at, especially the sort of tick box exercise that they're trying to do. I was talking to a head teacher last week who'd just been through an Ofsted inspection, and he was telling me that what his big objection was, he was downgraded from outstanding, and the reason was because he didn't meet one of the particular boxes that need ticking. But there were an awful lot of other things in the school that were absolutely wonderful. I know the school quite well. I mean, really super. But Ofsted didn't look at that. That's why the whole thing needs to be examined again, and whether they've got the right system in place.
OK, interesting. Let's have a look at... Oh, should we talk about Carol Vorderman? Oh, go on.
Yeah.
Go on. What's she said now?
Well, I agree with Carol Vorderman in this. Yeah, I absolutely do. This is the Women Inequalities Select Committee who are looking into issues around the menopause and had been asking the Health Minister, Maria Caulfield, to come along since the beginning of... Well, it's at the end of February, beginning of March, saying, Minister, you need to come into our committee. Now, that's exactly what happens with select committees. They can summon the minister to come and give evidence. It's not really a choice. Ministers have to go. But unfortunately, the Department for Health and Social Care, for whatever reason, decided the minister wasn't going. Carol Vorderman is part of the committees looking into what happens with menopause, and had seen the letter, came back from the Minister's department saying no. And unfortunately, on the day that Vorders was in Parliament, she witnessed the Health Minister drinking a cup of tea in Portcullis House, an hour away, during that hour of waiting for the committee, when she said that she was unavailable, she was far too busy, she couldn't attend. So a tweet went out. And this has caused now an all-out war between the Health Minister, Carol Vorderman, Parliament, the Department. Everybody is feeling upset and hurt over it. But I think it's really important that ministers do attend committees. It is unpleasant for them. And all Carol Vorderman's done is call out that behaviour. Now, the minister was invited on, I think, 3 separate occasions and just didn't choose to attend. So you kind of think she's almost brought that one upon herself. And if she had just gone and given the evidence, this is a really, really important subject to look at. And as we were talking about just now with your great interview with that lady and George's Law, these things are important. They need talking about. You need to shine a light on them so that we all understand. And this is what it's trying to do. So I think that in this instance, Carol Vorderman, tip-top.
Yeah, yeah. Well, good on her then, if pointing out. No point being caught in Portcullis House having a brew.
It's the most unfortunate, because I bumped into them all in Portcullis House, and you could see the sort of distance. She wasn't even sort of hidden away in a corner. It was quite in view of everybody. It was a little bit inflammatory.
Not good. Nigel, let's have a look in the Mail at Boris Johnson. Could be left in political limbo for months, they say.
That's what the Mail is saying, that they're working through the timetable after the Privileges Committee hearing, which probably won't report back until June or maybe not even until July. And if they don't report back till July, Parliament then goes into recess, so there is no vote. It needs a vote of the entire Commons about any penalty the committee wants to impose. So what would happen is that Boris Johnson would have to wait to September before finding out his fate.
Does that matter?
Well, it matters if we've got an election coming up. It rather depends on what the committee do. If they go for a suspension beyond 10 days, it means a recall petition and a possible by-election. Now, it rather depends from Boris Johnson's point of view whether this is a good thing or a bad thing. At the moment, the Parliament's kind of head pollster, Lord Hayward, is saying that Boris Johnson would lose in Uxbridge should he stand there in a by-election. But that could be a good thing for Boris Johnson, because he could then go and find a safe seat, go on the chicken run, find a safe seat, and come back at the general election. And so his political ambitions may be alive yet again. I think what's going to happen, just judging by the indications from the committee, is they will do some kind of penalty below those 10 days. So he'll get a rap across the knuckles, but he won't have to go for a by-election.
Right. If he was given more than 10 days, would it even get through the Commons?
It could do. Yeah, it's a free vote. I think that his support has drifted away. I'd have said about now that there are 20 MPs who still fervently support him, but that's it. So on a free vote with Labour and Tory MPs, he probably would get that suspension.
OK. Look, we need to leave you two there for the time being. Claire Pearsall, Nigel Nelson, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Indeed, because we want to talk to the Shadow Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, who joins us now. Good to see you, Mr. Streeting. I know there is real concern, isn't there, about the war on cancer that Sajid Javid... the war on cancer that Sajid Javid unveiled when he was Health Secretary, not meeting its targets. Is there some... do we understand why that is happening?
Well, bluntly, whether it's in cancer care or the wider challenges we have around patient access and NHS waiting times, the NHS simply doesn't have the staff it needs to get patients seen on time. And that's why cancer waits are in an appalling state. And as we know with cancer, as I know from my own experience with kidney cancer, timing really matters. So for 22,000 people to be waiting more than 2 months from being referred to being diagnosed and starting treatment or being given the all clear is completely unacceptable. That's why the government's got to focus both on retaining the great staff we already have in the NHS, but also adopting Labour's plan for the biggest expansion of NHS staff in history, because if we can double the number of medical school places, increase nursing training places by 10,000 a year, as Labour's proposing a fully costed and fully funded plan, then we will be able to, over time, build staffing levels back up to where they need to be in order to get patients seen on time.
Strike action recently, recruitment and retention alongside pay are some of the biggest issues. And it does seem, looking at Labour's plan to tackle NHS waiting times, it relies heavily on recruiting more staff. Vast numbers of them, 15,000 more doctors, 10,000 more nurses, 5,000 more health visitors. I mean, where are you going to get these people from, people that are willing to work in the NHS? And as we've seen with the strikes, what appeals to them at the moment with poor pay and understaffing on wards?
Well, we do have an absurd position at the moment where we're turning away thousands of straight A students from studying medicine every year because the government puts a cap on places and at the same time they're pulling the immigration lever to recruit people from overseas, including from countries on the World Health Organisation's red list. So these are countries with severe health care staff shortages of their own. So we're in this terrible situation where we're doing unethical international recruitment, turning away thousands of straight A students here at home, and we've got to deal with that situation. You are right, though, Ellie, to mention retention and making sure that the NHS remains an attractive place to work for people who are currently in the health service. I'm really worried about these junior doctors' strikes, and I'm worried that unless people at that stage in their career have great specialist roles to move into once they've finished their junior doctor phase of their career, we're going to lose people to countries like Australia, to Canada, where aggressive recruitment of UK doctors is already underway. So I hope the government can resolve the junior doctors' strikes amicably. I'm very concerned by the breakdown in talks and the mudslinging that government ministers have been doing towards junior doctors. I don't think that's really going to help. Maybe less time on Twitter and more time around the negotiating table, having a serious conversation with junior doctors would help to resolve these strikes.
There's a bigger question here, isn't there, Wes Streeting? You know, I mean, what you've outlined here to tackle this particular issue, fair enough. We've got the facts and figures. You claim it's all funded, but it's one issue amidst a failing NHS. Have we reached a point? And I know you've outlined some measures that you'd like to do if you got into power, but are we looking really now at having to properly restructure the NHS to make it suitable, to make it appropriate for the 21st century?
Well, I think the big change that we need in the NHS is to shift the focus of healthcare out of the hospital into the community, better access to primary care. You know, people are struggling to see a GP appointment, get a GP appointment at the moment, which is not only frustrating for patients, it's actually more expensive for taxpayers. An average GP appointment costs roughly £40. To go to A&E, it can be around £360. So it's not only bad for patients that people are struggling to get an appointment, it's worse for the taxpayer. So more healthcare in the community through general practice, community pharmacy, access to specialist community health clinics for specific conditions. I think all of that would help, because if we can do faster diagnosis, we get better treatment and better health outcomes. And finally, this country has enormous strengths in life sciences and technology. Some of the technology that we could be using in the NHS today isn't even particularly revolutionary. Why is it people have to scramble on the phone at 8 a.m. in the morning to get a GP appointment rather than book online or through an app like we do for most of the services we use now? I think getting the basics right is something that the government's gotten badly wrong and Labour would focus on. And that's before we even get to the really exciting agenda that's out there in terms of the breakthroughs in new drugs, new treatments, and robotic surgery.
But do you accept then that just throwing more money at the NHS, which is often what is called for, isn't necessarily the answer to making it work?
Yeah, I put a really big emphasis on reform for a couple of reasons. One is I'm not convinced that every penny that's going into the NHS today is being well spent. And before I go knocking on the door of the Shadow Chancellor or the Chancellor if we win the general election, I need to make sure that we're spending the money that's already going in as well as possible. And secondly, the Conservatives are leaving the public finances an absolute mess. So we can't just keep on assuming that there will be more money. I mean, Labour's got an ambitious and credible plan to grow our economy, because if the economy had grown under the Conservatives at the same rate it did under the last Labour government, there'd be about £40 billion to invest in public services without having to increase anyone's taxes. So we've got to go for growth. But in the meantime, we've got to make sure that every penny is being well spent, and that's a big focus for me.
Wes Streeting, it's really good to talk to you this morning. Thank you very much indeed. Really
Thanks for having me on. Take care.
Yeah, see you soon, we hope. It is 8 o'clock. You're watching Breakfast on GB News with Stephen and Ellie. We overran slightly because we wanted to have a good chat with Mr. Streeting, which means we're taking the break a little bit late. But don't go anywhere. We're going to be back very shortly.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Co.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We've got a brand new lineup every Saturday night on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Brand new Saturday nights on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Everything.
Around half of you say the investigation into Boris Johnson over Partygate is fair.
Good morning to you. It is 4 minutes past 8 on Friday, the 24th of March. Slightly overrunning just because we wanted a really good chat with Wes Streeting, the Shadow Health Secretary, at the back end of the last hour. So we were a little bit late, but we're going to crack on. This is Breakfast on GB News with Stephen and Ellie. These are your top stories.
We've got the results of the latest GB News People's Poll as we deliver your verdict on Boris Johnson and how you now view the Metropolitan Police in the wake of the Casey review.
The Bank of England's governor says he's got a more optimistic view of the economy despite the decision to raise interest rates yesterday. The move, of course, leaving hundreds of thousands of homeowners facing mortgage rates of perhaps around 8%, with banks now under pressure to offer more support.
We'll be speaking to the former Foreign Secretary, Lord David Owen, who says the UK should stay out of any negotiations between Ukraine and Russia. We'll be speaking with him shortly to find out why.
And Harry Kane has become England's record goal scorer last night. 3 Lions beating Italy 2-1 away in Naples. Kane fired himself into the history books with his 54th international goal to surpass Wayne Rooney.
And as ever, you can join in any of our discussions this morning by emailing gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet us at gbnews.
Now, let's bring you the latest in our GB News People's Poll. We've asked the public to give their verdict on both Boris Johnson and the Metropolitan Police following a controversial week for both.
Yes, regarding the former Prime Minister, 48% of people polled thought that the investigation into his alleged misleading of Parliament was fair, while only 11% thought the inquiry was unfair.
The poll also showed 45% of the public have got a negative view of the Metropolitan Police following the Casey report, 10% having a positive view, but 24% still neutral.
Well, joining us now is the academic and Professor of Politics, Matt Goodwin. Good morning to you, Matt. Thank you so much for your company this morning. Let's start then with the Privileges Committee investigation into Boris Johnson. Has been leading the headlines this week. Almost half of people say it's been done fairly. What do you make of this?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting that half the country think things are pretty fair here. That the investigation, the committee is going as they'd like it. Only about 1 in 10 think that the proceedings are unfair, which I think clashes perhaps with what some of us might see on social media, what we might be discussing with friends. I think some people do have a view that this is quite a politically motivated campaign against Johnson. Most people in the wider public do not hold that view. As I say, only about 1 in 10. So, again, this is to me another example, I think, of how maybe Johnson is a little bit out of touch with where people are now. His ratings are not very good. We had some other polling this week, Eddie, that showed 3/4 of the country now think that Boris Johnson is a dishonest politician. Only a small minority think he's honest. So, he's really on the wrong side of all of these findings now. It's difficult to see, actually, how Johnson comes back.
Yeah, I mean, isn't it interesting that we talk so much about him coming back, though, when there's been actually no indication that he wants to, and said the likelihood of it actually happening within the Tory party are increasingly slim anyway. Why have we got an obsession with it?
Well, I suppose an uncharitable view would be that's because our political class at the moment is very dry, is not very exciting, not very charismatic, and not very positive. And Boris always connected with a large number of people because he had many of those things. He was a charismatic figure. He was instinctively populist and positive about the country. He was very he was very upbeat, which I think people warmed to. But I can tell you, I was running a focus group 2 weeks ago in the Red Wall in Stoke-on-Trent. Maybe some of your viewers who are watching come from there. And I can just say, Boris's shine has really worn off in parts of the Red Wall. I mean, people really, really were frustrated, not just over Partygate, but just this sort of sense that the Johnson premiership wasn't really giving them what they expected in 2019. We've got record immigration. They wanted less immigration. We've got a sort of, pretty thin levelling up strategy. They wanted serious amounts of money, being sent to other parts of the country. And on Brexit too, I mean, I'm just not convinced Johnson really ever connected strongly with those voters in a way that he could have done, actually. So it's going to be one of those things historians are going to debate for years and decades to come. What happened to this guy who won a majority of 80 and, within 3 years was out of power and his party was wrecked? I mean, it's a fascinating chapter.
Really is, but still a lot of Boris loyalists. I mean, many of them emailing into the programme saying they want to see him back, and this is a witch hunt. I mean, he is certainly a divisive character. Let's have a look, shall we, at the view of the Metropolitan Police, which was another finding in this poll. Obviously, we had the Casey review this week that found racism, sexism and homophobia to be institutional in the Metropolitan Police. 45% of the public say they have a negative view of the police, but as Stephen rightly pointed out earlier, 24% say they have a neutral view, 10% say they have a positive view. So that's still 35% of people who have a positive view, which perhaps in a week such as this one where we've seen the review is surprising.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's clear that the chief of the Metropolitan Police has got a lot of work to do. Remember, this is a national perception of the Metropolitan Police, not just Londoners. I mean, it's clear that most people, a clear plurality out there, are looking at the Met and not seeing a force that inspires confidence, and they're not positive about it. I mean, only one in 10 have a positive view now of the Met. So, this is, as indeed Mark Rowley said this week, I mean, this is a sort of generational problem, really, for the force. I mean, he's saying he's going to be showing signs of improvement within a couple of years, but realistically, to bring about the kind of culture change that an organisation this size would need, I mean, this is a 10, 20, 30-year project. I mean, remember, we've been here before. We did have the Stephen Lawrence investigation, which concluded the same thing, which was that the London Met are institutionally racist and need to be reformed. And that was a very long time ago, and we're here again. So I think the patience is gone. So I think Mark Rowley is going to have to deliver some very, very tough reforms and some very, very radical changes very, very quickly.
But what about the validity of this, in the sense that, as you say, this is a nationwide poll, so for most people, they don't deal with the Metropolitan Police, so they're going purely off headlines, are they, to form their view, rather than any actual experience with officers?
Yeah, I mean, I should point out Londoners are equally as negative, but yeah, this is about public perception of the Met, and public perception matters. I mean, one of the problems that we've got here with policing and crime in general is that the worse the Met do, and the more we're spending our time talking about how unfair or how bad some of the policing really is in these police forces, it's going to affect perceptions of police more generally. That's the challenge, that what's happening in London will bleed into public perceptions of the police in other parts of the country. And so that's why these headlines, these debates, the fact, we're all here this morning talking about the problems in police, voters will pick up on that, and then they'll start modifying their judgments, and it will start influencing their views about local police. And that's the problem. So I think the London Met's got to get its arms around this. I mean, the Casey report, I don't know if any viewers have read it, but it is utterly devastating. She really did not pull any punches. A year-long investigation. They're going to have to deal with this as quickly as possible. Otherwise, inevitably, heads are going to roll, and I suspect we'll have a new leader, or it could end up being completely broken up altogether. But let's see.
OK, Matt Goodwin, really good to have you on the programme this morning. Thanks so much for your insight into our latest GB News People's Poll.
It is interesting, isn't it? I mean, there's obviously a lot of concern around the Metropolitan Police, and I can't imagine how you even begin to tackle it.
No. And Joe, I feel as well for the rank and file police officers who work really, really hard. I was outside Scotland Yard when the case review came out, and just seeing them go out to work, and I was thinking, you must be really up against it today. If you've gone into the force and you work hard and you're a good police officer, to have these kind of headlines must just be so disheartening.
Yeah.
Devastating, really.
If you're an officer, actually, I'd love to hear from you, Met or otherwise. GBviews at gbnews.uk. Do you accept that there needs to be significant change within the Metropolitan Police? Because I just think if you deal with a police officer, your view immediately changes. Actually, that these are good people trying to help you out and look after you and protect you. It's just these few bad apples that, sadly, there just appears to be more bad apples than we imagined in the Metropolitan Police and elsewhere to an extent.
And how do you fix it, like you say? Is it total reform? I mean, what do you think at home? GBviews at gbnews.uk. Should it be completely disbanded? Should we see London Metropolitan Police be like Northern Ireland? I think it went from the Royal Ulster Constabulary to the Police Service of Northern Ireland. It had a complete overhaul. Is that what we need to see happen in the Metropolitan Police?
Yeah, possibly.
Let us know what you think. OK, let's bring you up to date with what else is going on today. Protesters in France have set fire to buildings as demonstrations continue over government plans to raise the pension age. Firefighters attending the blaze at Bordeaux Town Hall late last night, and the cause is still being determined. It's the 9th national day of protests against the French president's pension reforms.
The BBC says the filming of Top Gear's latest series won't continue after Andrew Flintoff's crash. The former cricketer taken to hospital after an accident in December. The corporation have apologised to him and say they'll continue to support him with his recovery.
Tourists will be allowed to stand for the first time in the exact spot where the King will be crowned in a new display in Westminster Abbey, but they will have to wear socks. Specially guided barefoot tours will include access to the Cosmati pavement, which is usually closed off to the public. The display opens on April the 12th and is included in entry to the Abbey.
Is that the Cosmati pavement? Is it tiling then?
It looks like tiling, doesn't it?
Rather
And maybe
than
that's why
carpet.
you have to go through on your socks.
Must
So
be
we
very
do.
old. I know nothing about it. Never heard of it, actually.
We should go. We should go on a little school trip.
Should we?
Or GBNews trip.
Quite be nice. I think my socks are fairly decent
He's
this
always
morning.
got funky socks on. You usually have aliens or something. What have you got today?
No, I've just got the,
Oh, you've let us down
golf
today.
socks today. You know, that sort of golfy pattern.
No, you've let me down today. I've just told everyone you've got cool socks and you're in your golf socks.
All right. I've never played golf in my life.
Oh, wow. Well, lots of you getting in touch this morning. Do keep your views coming in, gbviews@gbnews.uk. There's a report out this morning from yours truly on paid miscarriage leave, which is going through Parliament at the moment. It's got second reading today, could become law. It's basically to allow paid miscarriage leave, 3 days of paid leave, if you lose a baby under 6 months. Currently, you only get paid leave if you've lost a baby after you're 6 months pregnant. Peter's been in touch saying, my wife went through a miscarriage at 10 weeks. It's very traumatic. However, we are both of the view that 4.5 months is the maximum that this bill should be brought down to. So you only get that paid leave once you're 4.5 months on. And Heather makes a really good point, saying, Stephen, very sensitively, questioned why miscarriage bereavement leave needs to be enshrined in law. He asked, why would an employer refuse time off for a miscarriage? It was a very good question. But Heather says the answer is very sadly yes. She's heard of an employer only allowing employee a day off work immediately after the death of their 7-year-old son.
I mean, how can that happen?
I'm very lucky that my lovely boss allowed me time off as I needed after my miscarriage in 2020 and again after a second miscarriage earlier this year. I'm very sorry, Heather. But many other women aren't blessed in terms of their employers. I think that's a very good point. There are many women who aren't protected. And as we touched upon in the last hour, it is physically very, very difficult, especially the later on you are, to give birth to a stillborn child. I mean, that is traumatic in itself. And then it's the emotional upheaval as well, isn't it? And currently, unless you're 6 months on, you don't get any sort of protection.
You just assume bosses are good, don't you?
You do.
Or most places. You think, well, they actually have some common sense. But no, as Heather says, not always. And that's why law is needed. I understand that. Yeah. Thanks, Heather, for that.
Yeah, keep your views coming in, gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Now, it's 18 minutes past 8. Should the UK stay out of negotiations between Ukraine and Russia? Well, a former Foreign Secretary thinks so. David Owen, no less.
Yes, he says any peace talks should be conducted between Russia and Ukraine alone, with the US the only country with the authority to act as a potential arbiter.
Well, let's speak to Lord Owen, who joins us now. What a pleasure to have you on GB News, Lord Owen. Thank you for your time this morning. Why do you think, in terms of this war, the UK, I beg your pardon, should stay out of any negotiations?
Well, it's not just the UK. Basically, the negotiations have to take place between Putin and the Ukrainian president. And we should do everything in our power to keep it on that basis. We are not participants in this war. We are helping Ukraine because we are a defensive organization. And NATO has kept its discipline very well. There was a bad period when we were having President Macron endlessly going and talking to Putin, and to some extent, much lesser extent, the German Chancellor. It's much better to focus the attention now of Beijing and President Xi on the need to bring Putin around the table with the president of Ukraine, and hopefully that will be done. The Spaniards are going to visit Xi, the Spanish Prime Minister. That's fine. Spain is a serious country. They'll follow the guidelines of NATO, and the guidelines of NATO, I'm sure, are no private enterprise, no one country going out on a limb, and focus on the fundamental issue, that is President Putin meeting the president of Ukraine.
Lord Owen, we are going to have to see a mediator in this when it comes to peace talks, though, aren't we? It's very unlikely that we'll see Putin and Zelensky round a table and actually coming to a resolution that makes both sides happy. You touched upon there President Xi and meeting President Putin this week. What do you make of that and China kind of positioning itself as a middleman? Is that something that we should trust, that they are there to negotiate peace?
There was an old slogan that Reagan used to use, trust and verify. And in negotiations like this, you've got to be very careful. Everybody's trying to seize an advantage. In my view, the war is going to start to, the tempo is going to increase now. The weather's improving, and I think that Ukraine are planning a really major offensive. They've been in a defensive role up until now. They've held that very well through the winter period, but I think we'll see there's much more movement, and we'll also see how much new weaponry they've had from NATO countries, and I think you'll see there's considerable improvement.
That you brought up trust and verify. It is such an important phrase and very apt for this. But even with that in mind, do you have any concern that even when China first came in with its peace plan, which may be flawed, but nevertheless the United States immediately came out and dismissed it? I mean, that struck me as being slightly odd when President Zelensky himself was saying that he was interested in what the Chinese were saying.
Yes, I think, again, the great person to be out there is President Zelensky. And he has links with China. Ukraine has been supplying with China with grain over many, many years in substantial percentage. This is not a minor feature in the import of food into China. Now, let's see what happens. I think, genuinely, let's see. And I'm not sure whether it will come to anything. Let's hope it will. And I think that there is no doubt that Russia and China are allied now. I personally think that's a sadness, and I think it was better to try and keep China separate from Russia, but that's their decision. And they are going to form more and more an alliance, which they'll try to extend to other countries around the United Nations and build up the numbers of countries that they can speak for. So it's not going to be automatic that in the past, the United States and Britain and France on the Security Council could guarantee, really, a majority of the General Assembly. The General Assembly will start to move slightly in favor of Russia and China, and they're exploiting that. But the most essential thing to do is to call Xi's bluff, if you like. He says he's got a peace settlement. Well, let's see what it's about. There's going to be no peace until there's a meeting with President Putin. And I think if he says to President Putin, now is the time to meet with Zelensky, it'll be very hard for President Putin, who's in a weak position, to not accept Xi's advice.
David Owen, it's a real pleasure to talk to someone with your experience. Thank you very much indeed.
It's nice of you to ask me on. Thank you.
You know, it's nothing about agreeing with David Owen's politics, is it? It's about a man of such experience. I mean, he was Foreign Secretary back in the late 77 to 79. I mean, it's a man who has seen it all. I mean, he's a great statesman, actually. How good that he'd come on the show. That's great.
No, very, very good to have him on the programme. Let us know what you think about his comments there. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Should we stay out of any peace negotiations? Should we trust President Xi of China?
Well, at least give it a chance.
Or at least give it a chance. Let us know what you think.
Yeah, interesting, isn't it?
Is it too early to be talking about peace negotiations? I mean, we're talking about the war waging on and more of an offensive from Ukraine. I mean, are we just talking too soon about peace?
Is it ever too soon?
Is it ever too soon?
Yeah. I don't know. Anyway, look, your views very welcome on that. Your views on the sport as well, which is heading your way in just a couple of minutes with Aidan. Don't go anywhere.
I I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories, controversies and issues.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
It's 5 times the opinion, 5 times the debate, and 5 times the fun. The Saturday 5. Saturday nights from 8. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
You could wink at the end. I can't Britain's wink. Listening.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
It's 28 minutes past 8. You are watching and listening to Breakfast on GB News with Stephen and Ellie. Still lots more to come on the programme.
Yeah, the Prince of Wales has been in Poland. It was a surprise visit. Well, sort of surprise, because we sort of knew to send Cameron Walker. Anyway, he's going to bring us the latest.
A surprise for you, perhaps. And as the clock springs forward this weekend, yes, we'll be talking to gardener David Dominy about how to put in those extra hours of light to use in your garden. I'm not happy about that because we're going to get less sleep.
Less sleep. No, it's a nightmare.
Furious.
Don't forget to get in touch. Loads of views coming in. We'll go through some of those in just a moment. GB Views at gbnews.uk.
Well, we're going to the sport now, and Aidan McGee joins us in the studio. Good morning to you, Aidan. How are you?
Yeah, very well, thanks. Yourselves?
Not too bad, thanks.
We're all right. Now, qualifiers are normally dull.
Yeah, I mean, look, that's why the World Cup is probably going to expand to 48 teams next time. It's too many, but it would eliminate the need for qualifying. There's too many qualifying games. They're a bit dull. Last night, though, completely different. It was a throwback to my youth. It was England.
Not that long ago.
Well, it may as well have been. I mean, England go to Italy. It's attritional. There's jeopardy. They're going up against the European champions. Of course, they won it at England's expense back in 2021. And they produce a really excellent performance. They're really up against it. They lose a man towards the end. Harry Kane scores his 54th goal for England. That's a record. Yeah. He's now a record England goal scorer. So that's a huge thing for him. He should have got there against France, really, when he missed the penalty in December. But there was a real feeling going into the game that there's a bit of international football fatigue. You know, we'd had the World Cup relatively recently. It ended in such disappointment. So for England to go there, and they hadn't won in Italy since 1961, is one of those things I never thought I'd see, England beating Italy in Italy. As I say, first time since 1961 that it's happened. England never looked in danger last night. They took the lead through Declan Rice, and obviously Harry Kane, thanks to that handball, slotted away the penalty to make it 2-0, and Italy got one back later on. So a great start to qualifying. And, I mean, if you look at the group, Stephen, I mean, it's Italy, yes, they're the main team. After that, you've got Ukraine, what state they're going to be in. North Macedonia. There's a massive joke a few years ago when North Macedonia beat someone and the opposing manager said, well, what happened if we'd have faced the whole of Macedonia? And then it got Malta as well. So it's a straightforward group, and I think they've broken the back of qualifying just by that result last night.
Well, yeah, well, that's also... In terms of Harry's goal... It's not just that he's the record holder, it's the speed he's done it in.
Yeah, it took my eye, actually. I've just did the calculations earlier on. I mean, if you look at it, Wayne Rooney, a stellar England player, 53 goals in 120 games. Kane's got 54 in 81. That's 39 fewer matches. That's about 3.5 years of international performance or international caps. So that's really, really impressive. And you look down the list as well, I mean, he's in exalted company. I mean, Sir Bobby Charlton did it, 49 in 106. Gary Lineker, 48 in 80. So that's similar numbers to Kane. I'd argue that Gary Lineker probably scored more important goals. Certainly at World Cups, he scored 10 in World Cups alone. Jimmy Greaves, 44 in 57, incredible ratio. Yeah. Michael Owen, very good as well, 40 in 89. So Kane really has... I mean, he takes a lot of penalties, but they kind of all did. So this is a hell of an achievement for him. And I think it probably takes a little bit of pressure off him as well. You could see a sense of palpable relief when the ball went into the net, especially as he was exercising a little bit of relief from what happened in Qatar in December. So brilliant performance.
Do you think he felt like he had to come and prove himself and show us on?
I think, honestly, Ellie, as an athlete, no matter what you've done, I think you'll always feel that. And I think you could just see it wasn't just any old goal last night. You know, he normally goes to the final, gives a little goes to the corner flag, gives it a fist pump. Last night there was rage inside him. You can see on the front page of the Telegraph, just out the corner of my eye, the look on his face. And it's immortality as well, at least for the time being. I mean, Wayne Rooney probably thought that in 2016 when he broke the record. Immortality for the time being is an interesting phrase. It is. It's an oxymoron, if ever I heard one. Yeah. But then Wayne Rooney probably thought he had the record for a good 20 years, and then he comes along and gets it taken off him within 6 years. Talking of record breakers, Ronaldo. Yeah, I mean, this is interesting because he's got, in his 197th international appearance, he has scored 120 international goals. That's, according to all records, that's the best of any individual. And if we compare it to Harry Kane's, it's very impressive. But he did make his international debut in 2003. International football is very, very important for Cristiano Ronaldo now because it's the only place he can really show his pedigree. He's playing in what colloquially would be known as a Farmers League in Qatar. Sorry, in Saudi Arabia. So he's not able to show, because it's such a poor standard, he's not able to demonstrate how good he is. International football is still the gold standard. And, yeah, you have to say, he's not had a really particularly good year leaving Manchester United. There was an interview that he did as well, where he didn't cover himself in glory and he was pushed out of United, really. He was upstaged at the World Cup by Lionel Messi. And so it's nice for him to get a little staging post last night as well. And Portugal won 4-0 against Liechtenstein. Okay. Yeah, well, there you go.
We have news from the world of wild athletics. They banned transgender women from competing in the female category at international events. Tell us a bit more about this.
Well, Lord Coe gave the press conference yesterday. There's been some deliberation over the decision. It's caused huge controversy. There's many protagonists in the female category saying it's just unfair that anyone should just be able to effectively become a woman, when they've got the testosterone levels of a man. It's just unsafe apart from anything else. And I want to bring in former British Olympic swimmer Sharon Davies, if I can, to offer a perspective on this. Sharon, thanks very much indeed for joining us here on GB News. What was your reaction when you heard the news yesterday, first off?
I'm just really relieved, really pleased for female athletes around the world. This has been a fight that's been going on now since 2015, so that's 8 years. World Aquatics changed their rule last year. World Rugby were the first to do that on safety grounds. And, the science doesn't back up the decisions that were made. There's 17 peer-reviewed studies out there that show that you cannot remove male puberty advantage. So you're asking female athletes to compete the race knowing that they're starting with a disadvantage. And that would never happen in men's sport. And so it was incredibly unfair and really difficult, for female athletes to deal with when they were not even being given the opportunity to give their opinions.
Do you feel a sense of relief? Were you worried at any point that the decision would go the other way?
Yeah, I think we all were. There's a tremendous amount of political movements that are going on rather than sport being governed in a way that was all about fairness. And for me, it should be safety first, then fairness, and then inclusion. And then if we can't, mix the three, we have to go, right, let's debate about this openly and find ways that we can create extra categories or open categories so that sport is for all. Because all sports people want everyone to do sport. We love our sport. We don't want anyone to be excluded. And it's very disingenuous when the word ban is used, because nobody is banned from sport. They're just banned from a category they don't qualify for.
It is difficult because this is a very delicate area, Sharon, isn't it? And I know it's interesting that Lord Coe said it was important to put sporting fairness before inclusion. But you can understand why some people are going to feel extremely hurt by this, can't you? I mean, you're not adopting an anti-trans position, are you?
Absolutely. No, never have. I've always, as I've mentioned, always loved sport. Believe sport should be for everybody. However, fairness should be for females as well as it is for males. So we had fair sport for men, and then we had unfair sport for female, with the inclusion of people who have male biology and have gone through male puberty. Now, that is not right. And you say, well, there'll be some people that will feel hard done by. But half the world was feeling hard done by, And so, therefore, it has to be about the majority have to be offered fair sport. And then we have to try and come together and find better solutions to make sure that everybody is included. But that doesn't mean throwing female athletes under the bus.
Sharon, it's Aidan again here. How ominous were Lord Coe's comments towards the end of the press conference where he says we're not saying no forever? Does that leave the door open in some ways to you that maybe this debate isn't quite over yet and there's a little bit of it to run?
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't really have a problem with that. I think as long as we're basing all the decisions on the science, which is what we weren't doing before, I don't think anyone is going to argue with that. We have transgender men, that's biological females, who've been racing in the women's category now for quite a long time. I watched, the NC2As last year where we had that. And females don't have a problem with that, providing nobody is on testosterone. So what we have to do is just to be able to work with the men's category and say, do we need to make that an open category? Or do we need to say that, you can identify as however you like, but sport is going to be based on biological reality? It's just, there's still debates to be had. Providing we can have them respectfully and everybody gets a voice, then that's a great way forward. I don't believe that at the moment we can remove male puberty advantage. And I'm not sure that we're ever going to be able to do that when we're talking about Q angles of people's hips and, bone density, which just comes with your biology.
Sharon Davis, thank you very much indeed for joining us on GB News this morning. It's a story that's captured the imagination of everyone. I think it might run this one. I don't think it's over.
Well, no, it's probably not over, but I have to say, I thought the way Sharon dealt with that was very respectful.
Yes.
And there are some physical elements which, and she and Lord Coe now has said need to be considered in terms of sporting fairness. But she was emphasising that it's still about inclusion, sport for all, but just how you recategorise it, perhaps.
Well, I do think those comments that we're not saying no forever mean that it's going to be discussed again further down the line. Maybe close the door on it.
That was quite interesting because Lord Coe was asked about this at that press conference, how he'd respond to a transgender athlete if they said that this decision was unfair. And he said, well, currently we don't have any transgender athletes in international competition, but they are expecting that day will come. And this is about...
Yeah, I think we've seen it in some of the US college system. That's where
it's coming through. And he says it's all about having a greater understanding of the science, and then from there, decisions, of course, can be made. And like you say, Aidan, it is something that does capture the minds, doesn't it? And it gets people talking.
We'll get our teeth into it on GB News, that's for sure.
Yeah. Well, yes. Well, it's nice that it was, certainly on this occasion, at least, treated with in a respectful way, which I think is very important. I think too many people jump on the bandwagon and just wave their flags about. That was a sensible discussion. There you go. Look, we've got the papers heading away for the final time this morning with husband and wife Nigel Nelson and Claire Pearsall.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
8:43, you're watching and listening to Breakfast with Stephen and Eddie. Very good morning to you.
Yes, good morning. And it's time to go through the papers now. And joining us this morning is political editor of the Sunday Mirror and Sunday People, Nigel Nelson. And he's joined by Claire Pearsall, a former Conservative advisor, husband and wife team. They've been doing a great job this morning. Do I have a papers list? No, I don't.
They agree on everything, don't they? No. Nigel, let's have a look at the Daily Star, should we? A quarter of adults want to be back in lockdown.
Yeah, this is an extraordinary survey. I thought everyone was actually relieved from it, that we were probably the exceptions. We rather enjoyed lockdown.
We enjoyed lockdown.
Yeah,
I enjoyed lockdown.
Quite nice, not to have to see people you didn't want to see, that kind of thing. And if you remember, the first lockdown came with really great weather, so you could go work in the garden. Anyway, so apparently a quarter of people feel the same way. What is the interesting thing about the survey is a third of those who were questioned say they would quit their job if bosses made them return to the office rather than work from home, which I think is the most interesting finding in the sense that what the pandemic did was to changed the way that we work. There was a reset about working, and now people can discover they can work at home. We work at home about 2 or 3 days a week without any trouble at all now. And having discovered that, it would be very difficult to go back to a different system. I mean, some people obviously can't work from home. You couldn't do your jobs here from home, really. But I do think that for those who can, it has been a completely liberating experience.
It made lots of things easier, hasn't it? I mean, for people with children especially, they've found childcare a lot easier to work around if they're working from home.
But also, it's just seeing your family.
The work-life balance is...
It is. I mean,
it's not all negative, though.
It's not all negative.
Even if you have to see the family.
Yeah, I mean, there are some payoffs.
That was my idea of a joke. It didn't work.
I was being really cautious, just in case. But we were incredibly lucky, and I think that we have to appreciate that we had outside space, we had enough room to work,
and took the cats for a walk.
Took the cats for a walk, which was brilliant.
I think it's interesting. I can imagine a lot of people preparing to email in right now, going, "It was awful. It was a disaster. It was." And it's not to take away from bad experiences, but if it worked for you well, then it was quite nice.
It must have been very lonely.
Yes.
That's the
I had many friends who were single and stuck in flats and had the worst time.
That's
and
the
others
point.
who, you know, as you say, were lucky to be in houses with gardens and pets and family around, and it was a lovely experience where life was simple.
And you get on with each other. I mean, we were really fortunate. We didn't fall out. So we may have sort of nitpicked at each other a couple of times, but there was nothing like that. But I know that some families found it really, really difficult all being under the same roof all of the time without any space to escape. So I do get that.
Can we have a look at the Telegraph? Because a tribunal has ruled that it is not racist to call someone a dark horse.
This is right. This is a ruling after a woman sued the Citizens Advice Bureau.
Oh, for heaven's sake.
For they used the phrase dark horse in front of her. She is a black woman and took offence. Yeah, didn't realise the story behind it. And actually, it's quite a compliment. If somebody says you're a dark horse, you have done something that they hadn't expected. You have exceeded all of their thoughts about you. So it is actually quite a positive thing. But I just think it points to more people being offended by things for a start, and having a list of words that we can or can't use anymore. And I think that there needs to be a little bit of common sense, and I really don't want to ban things. I'm not in favour of that, and I find language really, really interesting. The roots of it are amazing, and the phrase about dark horse can be traced back to the 19th century. And it was in a novel written by Benjamin Disraeli.
Oh.
That's where it comes from.
Is it about horses?
It's not... Well, I think there is a basis in
the
a horse. It was in a horse race, where the horse that won the race was a dark horse. Nobody expected it to win, and there it came romping home. So that's where it comes from.
And you have a dark horse.
And I do have a dark horse. So I'm very protective of the dark horse.
Yeah, I just think it's crazy when it's like anything which is to do with dark, black, or anything, you know, is sort of associated with skin colour, which it isn't. It's like blackboard.
Especially this is a compliment often.
Well, exactly.
Yeah. Well, like you say, with the Roald Dahl books, it was a blackboard, wasn't it? And white as a sheet. I think those are the two things that were...
You can't say white as a sheet.
Couldn't say white as a sheet. I think
you have a lot of white
now.
sheets.
Terrified. I think it's again colour, isn't it? And people are so afraid to be offensive. Any use of colour,
and I think that's
problematic.
That's the problem, isn't it? That you have to be so careful. You have to almost double-check yourselves. Whereas language and sayings have evolved over time. They've come through novels. They've come through poetry, music. And they've just formed part of our life. And I think you need to celebrate that rather than start banning it.
Yeah. We won't be able to say close but no cigar anymore because it's anti-smoking.
That's right, anti-smoking.
Nigel, tomato ketchup, we should all be bringing it home from abroad.
Apparently, yes. So forget about fags and booze on your duty-free. What the Sun has discovered is that people are now bringing home tomato ketchup especially. There's some other things as well that are much cheaper abroad than here. So a big bottle of of Heinz ketchup here is about £4. Get it in Turkey and it's £2.50.
It's in space, that one, but that's expensive.
Poland is also apparently very cheap too. So when we go on a holiday, I think I'll load Claire's suitcase with ketchup rather than the clothes that you'd like to bring back.
No, I love ketchup. I think it's fantastic. Would I go into a supermarket abroad to load up on it? No, I don't think I would. I pay absolutely no attention to the things that I have at home. I might have
You're not one of those people who goes into a supermarket in Spain or whatever and says, they've got that. We have that at home. No, I'm not. I like to go and have different things. I like to go and have whichever Spanish biscuits, for example, or Turkish biscuits, because it's something I don't have at home, and that's why I'm on holiday.
But would you pack them in the suitcase then and bring them home?
No, you see, we've just had this discussion, because a friend of mine will take her own tea bags on holiday with her.
I do that, don't take the mick.
And this is where you always have to be really careful, because whenever you talk about it, people sort of say, oh, I do that, or I take my own sachets of coffee, or whatever it is, and I just don't.
No, I don't.
I'm very particular with my tea, and I would, when I go to Ireland, I do always bring back tea bags and sausages.
You see, but it's interesting, you said take the mick. Now, I got told off once for saying that on air because they said it was racist against Irish people.
Oh, really?
Really?
I can't say that now.
So you can't say that anymore.
Oh, right.
No, I once had some
Would you bring
Irish...
anything back?
No, I don't do that.
No. You once had some Irish?
I once had some Irish tea, bought some Irish tea, and it was apparently a very well-known brand in Ireland.
Oh, yeah.
Which, thankfully, in terms of Ofcom, I can't remember what it was called. It was the most disgusting tea I've ever had. And apparently, it's a really popular brand. Tasted of dishwater.
But don't you always find if you bring something back that you've had abroad, and there's some alcohol that I've had in different countries, and it tastes fantastic when you're there, you bring it home, you drag it out when your friends come round, and it's just
Are there certain things like, I mean...
Limoncello.
Limoncello, that was it. That was precisely what I had, yes.
Australians on Vegemite won't eat Marmite, which I find that, you know, if an Australian comes over here, they tend to actually bring their Vegemite with them.
It's exactly the same.
Oh, it's not.
No,
it's
Marmite's
very
better.
different. Marmite's
I'm allowed to say that.
Vegemite's thicker, but
there's a texture to it.
It tastes the same.
No, it's got to be Marmite either way.
Oh.
Absolutely. No, I'll draw the line on that one.
All right, well, there you go. There you go. Now, let's have a look, Claire, at this council leader who's felled 110 trees and he's had to go. He's faced the chop.
He has indeed faced the chop.
Thank you.
Very good.
I'm here all week.
You should be a tabloid journalist.
I should be,
I followed this story quite a lot. I mean, this makes me a slightly sad individual, but council leader in Plymouth ordered the felling of 110 trees for an environmental redesign in Plymouth.
Right.
It was done at the dead of night.
Right.
Very little consultation, if any, with people. And it's just one of those ironic things. If you're looking to create biodiversity and more natural surrounding, you don't cut down 110 trees. And the saga has gone on. The group of campaigners managed to get a High Court injunction so that there can be a judicial review. But these trees are gone. He wanted to cut down some more. But Richard Bingley, the leader of Plymouth City Council, is stepping down.
Right.
He has realised that his time is up. He's not going to continue. He's barking up the wrong tree.
Oh, there you go.
Oh, very good.
Look, Claire, Nigel, thank you both very much. It's been really good to
you.
see you this morning.
Yeah, really good.
I still want to sit and watch you at the breakfast table. See how you argue things.
Come and join us.
Yeah. Well, yes.
Always welcome.
Join the family.
It's about time. I've been waiting years for the invite. There you go. Don't go anywhere. We've got all your views on the biggest stories coming up. We've got our People's Poll. And, of course, we've got the weather forecast.
Good morning, I'm Alex Deakin, and this is your latest weather from the Met Office. Some sunshine today, but there will be plenty more heavy showers as well, and a fairly gusty wind, especially across the south. That's where the isobars are closest. This area of low pressure has been dominating our weather for much of this week, and it's just going to throw more showers our way. Having said that, it is generally a bright, fine start for quite a few, certainly across much of the Midlands, eastern and southern England. Quite a bit of sunshine around, but the shower clouds will start to bubble up and they'll get going quite widely by late morning and into the early afternoon. Some heavy showers in places, thunderstorms are possible. They will tend to move through on the brisk breeze, certainly across England and Wales, but frequent showers for Northern Ireland, some quite heavy, slow-moving showers across central and northern Scotland. In the sunny spells, temperatures getting up into the teens once more, 14, 15 across the southeast, generally 10 to 12 Celsius, but feeling cooler when the showers come along. Lots of showers, quite a wet evening this evening for Northern Ireland and southwest Scotland. Elsewhere, again, the showers continuing to whiz by through the night, leading into a showery start to the weekend. It will be, again, reasonably mild, with temperatures mostly 6s and 7s across central areas, maybe 7 or 8 further south, but turning colder across northern parts, with fresher air moving in during the weekends. Initially across northern Scotland, plenty of showers still across southern Scotland, northeast England tomorrow morning. Gradually easing here, and elsewhere not as many showers, better chance of a drier day for Wales and southern England and across northern Scotland, although here, as I mentioned, it is turning colder, temperatures struggling somewhat. Still double digits to maybe teens elsewhere, but that colder air is going to win out as one area of low pressure moves away. This one will bring some more wet weather across the south, but as that clears on Saturday night, the colder conditions drop more widely across the country for Sunday. Goodbye.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories, controversies and issues.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
It's 5 times the opinion, 5 times the debate, and 5 times the fun. The Saturday 5. Saturday nights from 8. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
You could wink at the end. I can't Britain's wink. Listening.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Co.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions are, those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank. My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We've got a brand new lineup every Saturday night on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Brand new Saturday nights on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Around half of you say the investigation into Boris Johnson over Partygate is fair.
Good morning to you. It's 9 o'clock on Friday, the 24th of March. This is Breakfast on GB News with Stephen and Ellie. These are your top stories.
We've got the results of the latest GB News People's Poll as we deliver your verdict on Boris Johnson and how you now view the Metropolitan Police in the wake of the Casey review.
The Bank of England's governor says he has a more optimistic view of the economy, despite the decision to raise interest rates yesterday. The move, though, has left hundreds of thousands of homeowners facing mortgage rates up to about 8%. Banks are now under more pressure to do more to help.
With lighter evenings already upon us and a smell of spring in the air, March is the time that your vegetable growing could step up a gear. We're going to be joined by a gardener to find out what you should be planting.
And Harry Kane became England's record goal scorer last night as the Three Lions beat Italy 2-1 in Naples. He fired himself into the history books with his 54th international goal, passing Wayne Rooney.
And as ever, you can join in any of our discussions this morning by emailing gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Well, let's kick straight off, should we, with the GB News People's Poll. And we've asked you to give your verdict on both Boris Johnson and the Metropolitan Police, following a pretty controversial week for both.
Yes, regarding the former Prime Minister, 48% of you thought that the investigation into his alleged misleading of Parliament was fair, while only 11% thought the inquiry was unfair.
The poll also showed 45% of you have a negative view of the Metropolitan Police. Following the release of the Casey report, 10% have a positive view. Interestingly, I think 24% have got a neutral view. So that sort of evens it out a little bit.
Well, joining us now is our political reporter, Olivia Utley. Good morning to you, Olivia. And you have been covering the Privileges Committee investigation into Boris Johnson all week. You're totally across this. What do you make, then, of the results of this People's Poll? Because there has been a lot of conversation this week, hasn't there, about whether or not it's fair and who's sitting on this committee. 48%, though, say it is fair. Did that surprise you?
Well, it didn't surprise me that much, but I think it's bad news for Boris Johnson. I think what we saw this week, one way or another, was the end of Boris Johnson's frontline political career. I think it could be that he gets off on the charge of knowingly misleading Parliament. That's quite a high bar, and the committee might find that they don't feel that they're able to absolutely prove that. So it could mean, I think the likelier scenario is that he gets suspended but doesn't get the full 10-day suspension and so doesn't lose his seat in the Commons. But I think the whole sort of unedifying spectacle was pretty fatally damaging for Boris Johnson, really. And I think that the accusations that the committee was biased hasn't played well at all with the public, clearly. I think also the way in which he suggested that the leaving drinks that he held were absolutely essential for work purposes might have sort of got him off with the committee, because all he has to do is prove that he wasn't lying when he said that it was necessary. But even if he does get off on that technicality, it plays very badly indeed with the public. And I think that's what we're seeing reflected here in this poll. People are fed up with the Boris Johnson drama, the sort of 10-part act of Boris Johnson, and they think, no, what's happening now is completely fair. So his last real hope for making a big political comeback was to sort of throw shade on the committee and suggest that he's been a victim of a kangaroo court, but it looks like the public isn't having that.
Interesting. I mean, David's been in touch saying Remainers are exercising revenge in a kangaroo court. The preening interrogators were a disgrace to justice. I guess it's not about justice, though, is it, in that sense? It's not a court. You know, it's about politics.
Yeah, and it's a question of whether he knowingly or recklessly misled. I think the glimmer of hope for Boris Johnson in this in his defence, which amounted to essentially that the committee is biased, was that Harriet Harman, who is the Labour chair of the committee, tweeted last year saying that Boris Johnson knowingly lied. And his argument, and you can see the logic in it, is that if she was prepared to say that a year ago, before the committee even sat down for the first time, then surely she can't be unbiased. Surely she had prejudged, she'd made up her mind already. But Harriet Harman generally conducted herself pretty well. That's the sort of consensus in Westminster. She didn't come across as sort of hectoring Boris Johnson at all. It wasn't the Harriet Harman show in any way. So I think if she had sort of shown any bias or been too enforced her personality on the proceedings too much, then perhaps Boris Johnson might have got away with this bias line. But I don't think she did, so I think it's bad news for Boris.
And there has been some criticism as well of that second charge, because it was knowing or recklessly misled Parliament, and it was recklessly that came in later, didn't it? And there was some criticism that they were trying to pin it on Boris Johnson, I mean, whatever they could, and that's where the second charge came from.
Yeah, and I think I can see the argument behind that, and it is quite logical, because previously committees investigating the behaviour of MPs were looking for, they had to build their case on a charge that they were lying to Parliament, in contempt of Parliament, and that is the precedent. And this committee has, instead of looking into whether he knowingly misled Parliament, they're looking into whether he knowingly or recklessly misled Parliament. And I think that it's quite likely that they find that they can't prove that he knowingly misled Parliament, but they can prove that he recklessly misled Parliament, which would leave us in sort of unknown territory, because this word recklessly hasn't appeared in the context of these committees before. So I can understand the people who feel as though essentially the committee has lowered the bar for Boris Johnson in a way that they have never lowered the bar for another MP in the same situation. So his supporters do have an argument when they say that it's unfair.
It's interesting, though. You sort of say his goose is cooked, almost whatever the outcome of this. Is there a sense now that, because, I mean, for him to get anywhere in terms of politics now, he'd have to have a lot of backing from fellow backbenchers to sort of work his way up the echelons and potentially become leader again. Has that support just gone now?
Well, I think it really has, and I think the moment that we saw that was that vote on the Windsor framework, Rishi Sunak's plan to fix the Northern Ireland Protocol. And in the days before we had that vote, the rumours going around Westminster were that up to 34 Conservative MPs would rebel against the government and vote against the Windsor framework. 34 MPs would mean that Rishi Sunak was relying on the votes of Labour MPs to get through, which makes the Prime Minister look very weak. And Boris Johnson joined that rebellion. He joined that rebellion very loudly. He said the night before his committee hearing, when all eyes were on him, I'm going to vote against the Windsor framework. And I think he was hoping that lots of backbenchers would swarm in behind him.
A bit like the Brexit, when he announced his
Exactly,
Brexit.
when he announced a few years ago, when he was able to hold that sort of sway in the House of Commons. But actually, the rebellion looked pretty pathetic in the end. There are only 22 MPs who rebelled against the Prime Minister, and most of them were people who've sort of had their day in the sun and are thinking of retiring soon. There weren't any sort of rising stars in the Conservative Party who were prepared to vote against the government and with Boris Johnson. So yes, as you say, he would need the support of not just the kind of Ian Duncan Smiths and Priti Patels of the world. He'd need the support of some rising stars in the party, and it doesn't look like he's got that.
Interesting, isn't it, Olivia? Thank you very much indeed. I know you may not be happy with that. A lot of you messaging Clive won't be happy with that, but if that's a reality, Clive,
Yeah.
You know, that's the thing.
Marion says, Boris Johnson's faced so much prejudice in this witch hunt hearing. It was so spiteful. And Karen says, in our household, we would certainly want Boris back. We have never taken part in any polls regarding Boris. How many of us are out there? Perhaps we're the silent majority in all of this.
Well, maybe. But it's about if you get a say, isn't it? And in terms of that, get a say if he was in government or leading the party and then there was an election. But up until that point, you don't get a say.
No.
And that's the way it works. Anyway, keep your thoughts coming through gbviews at gbnews.uk. Now, the government has missed a major NHS target. New data shows more than 22,000 cancer patients, so these are people with an urgent referral, are still having to wait more than 2 months to start treatment.
This comes after former Health Secretary Sajid Javid promised a war on cancer, and the government vowed to reduce the 62-day wait time to pre-pandemic levels.
Well, earlier we spoke to the Shadow Health Secretary, Wes Streeting. Here's what he had to say.
Well, bluntly, whether it's in cancer care or the wider challenges we have around patient access and NHS waiting times, the NHS simply doesn't have the staff it needs to get patients seen on time, and that's why cancer waits are in an appalling state. And as we know with cancer, as I know from my own experience with kidney cancer, timing really matters. So for 22,000 people to be waiting more than 2 months from being referred to being diagnosed and starting treatment or being given the all clear is completely unacceptable. That's why the government's got to focus both on retaining the great staff we already have in the NHS, but also adopting Labour's plan for the biggest expansion of NHS staff in history, because if we can double the number of medical school places, increase nursing training places by 10,000 a year, as Labour's proposing a fully costed and fully funded plan, then we will be able to, over time, build staffing levels back up to where they need to be in order to get patients seen on time. I'm really worried about these junior doctors' strikes, and I'm worried that unless people at that stage in their career have great specialist roles to move into once they've finished their junior doctor phase of their career, we're going to lose people to countries like Australia, to Canada, where aggressive recruitment of UK doctors is already underway. So I hope the government can resolve the junior doctors' strikes amicably. I'm very concerned by the breakdown in talks and the mudslinging that government ministers have been doing towards junior doctors. I don't think that's really going to help. Maybe less time on Twitter and more time around the negotiating table, having a serious conversation with junior doctors would help to resolve these strikes.
Fascinating, actually, to get that perspective. The health service is one area where Labour is actually coming out with something concrete, or comparatively concrete. You know, we're looking at this, we've costed it, stuff we can judge them on, whereas obviously a lot of the other areas we're not getting that much detail. So it's an interesting area to focus on, but of course it's an area where they feel more confident.
So some of you have been responding to Wes Streeting's interview with us a little bit earlier on. Sharon from Coventry has been in touch. Good morning to you, Sharon. I've been in the NHS for 34 years and I'm fed up of feeling unappreciated by ministers. I listened to Wes Streeting this morning and wanted to shout at him. He makes no reference to the point that nurse training places are not being filled at university. Only 1 in 3 places are not taken. Of those that are, a fair percentage are being taken by overseas students who do not intend to stay in the UK but to go to the States instead.
John says, I'd like to point out that I live in Wales. As a devolved country, the NHS is run by the Labour government here. People need to be aware of what a shambles Drakeford and his mob are making of it. Don't listen to the Shadow Health Secretary. Investigate and see for yourself. It is worse in Wales. It is Welsh Labour. I mean, they are sort of separate entities as far as that goes. Are they pursuing the same policies that Wes Streeting would want to? I mean, I can't answer that. I don't know. But it's a fair point.
Yeah.
As I say a lot, don't I, when there's stuff I'm not sure about, I go, oh, it's a fair point. Which it is.
It's good. That's what's good about the GB views that come through, is it does make you think, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
And it's always good to just hear the other side, often to what you might think. Ruth says, my son is one of the straight-A students that Wes Streeting was talking about who couldn't get into med school. He's now doing biomed. We need more medical places at university. I also think it should be free. And when they're qualified, they should stay in the NHS for a certain number of years to pay back all of their training costs. This would also help with retention. Not a bad idea,
Well,
is it?
yes, like a long-term incentive plan sort of thing in that way.
And to get that investment back into the NHS, because as Wes Streeting was saying, so many doctors and nurses, they go off to Australia or Canada and better paying
Well, do you know, when you
countries.
join the army, probably the same for the Navy and the Air Force as well, you know, when you first join after your initial training, then you're signed up for a certain number of years.
Oh, yeah.
You know, it's like, I don't know what it is now. Is it 3 years? Is it 4 years? But that's what you signed up for.
It's not a lot, really, 3 or 4 years.
No, well, don't know. But you see, if you did the same with... Why not do that with medical staff?
Yeah.
They will assist you with some of the costs or whatever, but then, you know, you've got to be with us for this period of time. I don't think that's a bad idea, and I think if it reduced the cost of qualifying, people may go for that. Let us know what you think. Anyway, especially if you're in that position, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Now, 1 in 4 pregnancies end in loss, and today Parliament is expecting to hear a second reading of what they're calling the Paid Miscarriage Leave Bill.
Yes, it's a bill introduced by SNP MP Angela Crawley that seeks to grant 3 days of statutory paid leave to parents who experience a miscarriage before 24 weeks of pregnancy.
Now, currently, paid bereavement leave is only provided following stillbirth after 24 weeks. That's 6 months into the pregnancy.
Well, I went to meet one of the campaigners for the bill, Keely Langthorne. She lost her son, George, when she was 5.5 months pregnant, and she calls this bill George's Law.
George Langthorne was born sleeping at 22 weeks.
George was a baby. He only weighed a pound when he was born, but he had blonde hair, big feet. Like me. He was a fully formed baby. We got to dress him and bathe him and photograph him and cuddle him. And yeah, but for anyone going through an experience of birth, it's terrifying anyway, especially the first time. But to know that you're going through a birth and that your baby's not going to survive is horrendous.
Because George was born at 24 weeks, Keely was not entitled to paid miscarriage leave. Luckily, the law firm she works for allowed her 6 weeks off to grieve. But Keely was aware that other parents were not in the same fortunate position.
The law says you go back to work at 9 o'clock the next day. So, for instance, I left George at the mortuary on a Thursday night, and the law says that I go back to work at 9 o'clock the next day. There's no way I could have done that. I just physically had a baby. Mentally, I was grieving the loss of my son. I don't know how anyone in their right mind would think that it's okay to say to someone, go back to work the next day, you'll be all right. Or take it as sick leave. But this isn't sick leave. It isn't sick leave, it is an annual leave.
Keely is now campaigning for a change in the law, which would give a statutory 3 days of paid miscarriage leave for a loss at any time in the pregnancy. She's calling it George's Law.
We are now in 2023 where all we talk about is well-being and equality and diversity. But I don't see how any firm can say that they promote equality and diversity if they haven't got a baby loss policy in place.
1 in 4 pregnancies end in miscarriage. Under current legislation, workers are entitled to 2 weeks of paid bereavement leave following a stillbirth after 24 weeks of pregnancy. But for parents who experience a loss after less than 24 weeks, they must rely on either unpaid or sick leave if they feel unable to return to work after a loss. Ruth Bender-Attic is the director of the Miscarriage Association.
Yes, we do support the bill, and we support it strongly, and we've been talking with Angela Crawley about it for quite some time. First of all, they'd have at least a little bit of time to begin to recover from the kind of physical and emotional impact of miscarriage or ectopic pregnancy. It would really go a long way in recognising and acknowledging even these tiniest of lives, which for most people, the minute they have a positive pregnancy test, they're already thinking and planning and dreaming about.
We asked the government to respond to this call for George's Law, but nobody was available for interview. They gave us this statement. Miscarriage is a very personal experience, and some of those affected may want to stay at home, while others may prefer to continue to work or alternatively may need time off later. The government believes that individuals are best placed to understand their own specific needs, and good employers will respond to requests made by their employees in a sensitive way. Keeley says she will still continue to fight for George's law. Ellie Costello, GB News.
Very tough for an awful lot of people, isn't it? Your thoughts on that? GB Views at gbnews.uk.
We've got lots to come on the programme. That's after this short break.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything, I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories, controversies and issues.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
It's 5 times the opinion, 5 times the debate, and 5 times the fun. The Saturday 5. Saturday nights from 8. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
You could wink at the end. I can't Britain's wink. Listening.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
(9:23). Good morning to you. This is Breakfast with Stephen Donnelly.
Now, with lighter evenings imminent and a smell of spring in the air. Yeah, I can smell it. Can you?
No, I can smell your fake tan, but that's about as far as we're going.
I'm marinating over here. It's always a Friday tradition for us.
Yes.
That's my fake tan. But anyway, I'm getting very dark in my arms, actually. It does. It smells of stale biscuits. I can only apologise. Sorry. Anyway, now March is the time that your vegetable growing should step up a gear.
Yes, in fact, 2/3 of UK adults are now trying to grow their own as part of efforts to save money amid the cost of living crisis. Good idea.
Yep, well, this morning we're joined by TV gardener David Dominy, who is here to tell us more about the mental and physical benefits of being in your garden and growing your own produce. And David, what have you got in front of you there? Good morning to you. That looks great.
Well, it's just a small thing. One of my favourite plants, you know, for the garden, very easy to grow, incredibly nutritious, is the blueberry. And everybody thinks that producing plants is just all about the thing you eat at the end. But look at the little bell-like flowers at the top. You get beautiful green leaves throughout the season, and then you get the berries, but you also get autumn colour too. So a blueberry gives you a lot of bang for your buck. But it's not just blueberries, of course, currants and gooseberries and raspberries and strawberries. All the things that we're seeing missing out on some of our supermarket shelves can be actively grown yourself at home. And you don't need a grow your own area, because certainly the fruiting bushes you can plant in between your delphiniums and roses in the borders and then go into crop. But if you've ever fancied growing your own from a simple veg planter, which is like a giant grow bag, you can create just a whole herb garden on the step outside the front of your house. The popularity of growing your own is not just the process of saving money, reducing plastic and becoming self-sufficient. It's enjoying the process of growing it as you go.
Yeah, well, there is something very nice about it, I have to say. But in terms of those people who are wanting to get a good range of things in, from your tomatoes to your runner beans to your potatoes and all the rest of it, what is happening? When do you have to start getting these things in the ground?
Well, it's a lovely time of year for planting fruit now. So if you go to a local garden centre, there's ample fruit bushes and fruit trees that you can plant into your garden to establish themselves as they come into spring. But of course, at this time, March, sowing seeds for things like peas and tomatoes are the key thing. And it's incredibly good, not just for your physical well-being by ingesting very fresh, healthy, much more full of flavour plants, but for your mind as well. You know, dopamine and serotonin, two neurotransmitters in our brains closely associated with happiness, are spurred on. I mean, when you sow seeds and you're looking forward to them growing, I mean, dopamine is released into the brain for long-term goals where we're looking forward to things. And coming down and seeing them grow gives us pleasure. And serotonin is released that gives us a feeling of motivation and happiness, is based on success of seeing them germinate. And growing things like basil on the windowsill in peat-free compost and then potting it up, the fragrance of it on your own windowsill, you don't need a massive area. The secret is, write down a list while you're relaxing at home with a cup of coffee or a glass of wine, all the things you like to eat, your fruit, your veg and your herbs. Then choose one or two of them and just start growing. Pots, containers or veg planters that I mentioned early on. And that type of interaction will begin a hobby for you that will embellish and enrich your life. When you hear the birds outside, the vitamin D from the sunshine, the fragrances, and, you know, it lifts the heart, it nourishes the soul.
It does, and I can imagine it's good exercise as well, getting into your garden and doing some gardening. I mean, it's not easy, is it? I mean, for people like me who can't seem to keep anything alive, any plant I have dies on me, what are the foolproof veggies and plants could we be growing that have a good chance of success?
Well, the first one will be cress. I mean, growing cress on a bit of tissue paper, on a saucer, on your kitchen windowsill. Give that a grow, because effectively you just water, the cress will root into the paper or the tissue paper or cotton wool or whatever you've got. You don't actually need soil, although you can grow them in soil. And they germinate within 24 hours, so you'll get the kick of seeing them germinate. And very shortly afterwards, a week or so, you'll get younger plants. And if you crop that, and if you really like you know, a decent scrambled egg with cream and a crack of salt and pepper and a bit of butter on granary, and then you put the bite of the cress on the top, it's incredibly nutritious. I mean, cress has more calcium in it than milk, more vitamin C than an orange, more vitamin E than broccoli, and more folate than banana. It's incredibly healthy on your windowsill. And if you don't want to do that, just go and buy a currant, red currant, white currant, or even black currant, and grow that in the garden. It's incredibly low maintenance. And when you pick those berries fresh, put them in your mouth and, you know, force your tongue to the roof of the mouth so they pop and the juice comes out, you'll be very grateful for it. Enhanced flavour, enhanced energy and enjoyment in growing. Growing your own, it's the best hobby you can engage with for you and your family.
All right, just in 15 seconds, do you need a seed potato if you're going to do potatoes, or can you use just any old potato?
Seed potato is a definite. It has been bred to produce and grow and be disease resistant. So buy seed potatoes from a garden centre and you'll be producing things like this in your own garden. Do not use the potatoes that you buy to cook with from supermarkets. Seed potatoes are a winner, you're quite right.
Lovely, and that's a whopper you've got there. Lovely, have a good baked spud with that.
That's a lovely one.
David, really good to see you this morning. Thank you very much indeed.
I'm going to be growing some cress.
Yep. Oh, yeah.
I love egg and cress sandwiches, yeah. And you'll be on the potatoes.
I was just thinking, though, with that, I was thinking, oh, cress. But then, actually, scrambled eggs with a bit of cress on top would be quite nice.
And very good for you.
Gotta say.
There's lots of health benefits.
Easy for the kids to grow as well. And those, you know, if you've got a boiled egg shell,
yeah,
and you can make a little, you know, they grow hair, don't they?
Did you do that at school?
Yeah.
We did that at school as well.
Lovely.
I didn't kill that off, actually. That's
well, there you go.
Yeah, very good.
Anyway, if you're growing anything, let us know. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Just to let you know as well, it's never too late to take up a new sport.
I'm going to get you on all the hobbies today, aren't we?
I won't be doing this. But you might be inspired by our next guest. We'll tell you more in a minute.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I have walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It is 9:33. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Stephen and Ellie.
And we're joined by the family, sports broadcaster and journalist Aidan McGee, and also our lovely showbiz Stephanie Tecci. Good morning to you both. Aidan, let's start with you, shall we? And should we touch on Harry Kane last night? It was a good night for him, wasn't it?
It was a good night for England, good night for Harry Kane. His 54th international goal in just 81 appearances. That makes him England's all-time leading goal scorer, and he's in really exalted company. Ellie, he really is. Wayne Rooney, 53 goals, he was the next down. Second on the list, Sir Bobby Charlton, 49 in 106 from midfield. Gary Lineker, Jimmy Greaves, Michael Owen, Alan Shearer isn't even on the list. And he must have clocked up about 30-odd goals for England, so some really, really good names there. And for Harry Kane to go to the top of that list, especially in just 81 appearances. And I think it was a little bit of bloodletting for him as well. He missed that penalty against France. That was only, 3 months ago, and it put us out of the World Cup. And you could just see the palpable relief when he started celebrating. It really was something to behold.
It's interesting. I quite like Harry Kane just because he's quite a private, quiet man, isn't he?
You know, when he scores goals, he's not. But
but you know what I mean. He doesn't play the game in terms of the showbizy lifestyle.
No, I mean, he gets a lot of unwarranted stick as well. I mean, you get that between fans at club level. But what an ambassador! And you know, you see he gets fouled, he doesn't react. He just gets up, gets on with things. His numbers for Tottenham are outstanding, and it gives rise to feelings that he'll probably leave Tottenham in the summer because he can't fulfil what he wants to achieve in terms of winning trophies there. He probably has to move to one of the Manchester clubs, I would have thought, this summer. But yeah, massive thing for him last night, and a great win for England as well. I mean, Italy. They haven't won away in Italy since 1961.
Oh, that's a long time.
One of those things I never thought I'd see. And it was an attritional game. It was an old-school World Cup qualifier in an era when World Cup qualifiers are getting a little bit lacking a bit of vigour about them, I would have thought. And they'll be less likely to be celebrated in future because they're going to have 48 teams at the World Cup, so there'll be less. Anyone qualifies, you don't need qualifying.
Yeah. I tell you what, there's that old saying, Aidan, isn't there? Never meet your heroes.
Exactly.
So I'm going to do this next game. Should I? Shall I take it away from you?
Go on then, why not?
No, go on.
All right. I'd like to introduce Paul Parker, the former England and Manchester United and Queen's Park Rangers defender. Paul, good morning to you on GB News here.
Good morning to you.
Good. I saw you make your debut for QPR back in August 1987. I'm still on a high from that, actually. Put it into some kind of context for us. England winning in Italy for the first time in more than 60 years. It's a tough thing to do at any time, isn't it?
Yeah, generally, yeah. I mean, to go there and do it, and especially do it in Napoli as well, because, I mean, I'm sure one of the reasons why they wanted to play that game there is because of the way the fans could really cause something down there, make it a difficult place to go and play. But England weathered the storm for the first 4 or 5 minutes, and once they got that first goal, really for the first half, you would have thought it was game over because there was nothing there. They seemed to have lost their fight, the Italians. England then got the second goal, and in theory, the game could have been dead and buried if Jack Grealish had scored what I would say was a sitter, but with my credentials as a goal scorer, I don't think many people would accept that. But it looked easier to miss. It looked easier to, one that he should have scored, should have put it in the back of the net, but you pull it wide. It was just, it was really strange. You just had to caress it into the net rather than try and smack it in there. But someone else who's more of a natural goal scorer, I think it would have been England 3-0 up at half-time.
Someone who didn't miss was Harry Kane, of course. He now becomes England's all-time record goal scorer, as we've been discussing here with Stephen, Ellie and Stephanie. Just contextualise his achievements for us, if you can, because he's done it in just 81 caps. That's 39 fewer than Wayne Rooney managed.
Yeah, I mean, we look at it now, and football is about winning games of football, and you need someone who's going to help you win. And Harry Kane is that kind of player. He can ghost in from somewhere, and he can change the complex of a football match within the space of a minute or two, and he's done that for Spurs for a number of seasons now. He's got them out of jail so many times just by popping up in the right place at the right time, and he's doing it again this season for Spurs and for England. And it's so important for England to get as many points in as quickly as possible to make qualification easy, and to go and win your first game in Italy, then coming back to Wembley and playing against Ukraine, it puts England in a great position because at this moment in time.
On that point, Paul, England now, it's semi-final in Ukraine at the World Cup, final at the Euros in 2021 at Wembley, quarter-finals in December in Qatar. Is it time this squad came of age now? Do we have the right to expect them to try and win something now?
I don't think you ever really have the right. I think you always have to still earn the right. It doesn't matter if it's a game of football. It doesn't matter who you're playing against. You've got to go out first of all, and you have to go and win your battles, and then maybe that'll take you then on to winning the war. And the war is actually to have that trophy, that Euros or that World Cup, and you get to a final. And if you really, really work hard and you have that little bit of luck, it gets you over the line. And there's been, occasions, on a couple of occasions, where we haven't had the rub of the green and it's gone against us. But you can't keep going by that way. You have to earn it somehow. And if we look at it now, we know that certain teams in Europe are going to be stronger this time around than what they were from the World Cup, the European sides, I should say. So it's going to be a tough haul, really, for England to go and try and win this trophy. And for me, it's the most difficult trophy to win. I just think there's far more better European sides in the world at this moment in time. So it's a tough one to go out and win.
And just finally, Paul, Ukraine at Wembley on Sunday. Ukraine hadn't played a competitive match or indeed any kind of match since last September. It's a huge opportunity for England to assert their authority in this group.
Without doubt, everyone will be looking now for England to, after the game on Sunday, to have 6 points. 6 points up on the board. They can leave the points until after. But they will be expecting that on Sunday evening for England to have 6 points out of their first two games, and it's a great start. And it'd be good to have it wrapped up. Then the manager can go out and start giving other players opportunity to go and prove themselves before going into the tournament in Germany.
Paul Parker, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Sorry,
no, I was just going to say, because look at you. Paul, you're his hero. Yeah. The man's a nervous wreck. Good Paul.
Yeah, thanks very much for joining us, and thanks for those great years of viewing from when I was a kid at Loftus Road.
Oh, that was sweet.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
There you go. He's been so excited about talking to Paul Parker all morning.
Yeah. Oh, you look a bit teary-eyed.
Oh. First time I actually met him.
Do you know,
he went off to Man United, he went off to briefly played for Chelsea, Derby County, and he played for England in the World Cup in 1990, got to the semi-final. He wasn't a first choice at the start of the tournament, but Robson brought him in. He did not let England down in any way, shape, or form. He was brilliant.
It's lovely when you meet your heroes like that and they turn out to be nice.
Absolutely, yeah.
Lovely.
That was a nice moment to share.
It was. He's like a little kid.
Embarrassment, isn't it?
Well, no, it's fun. It's all part of the fun. Stephanie's here, and we've gone from a lovely moment to not so lovely moments in terms of the showbiz, actually.
Yeah, it's been a bit of a hard one for Gwyneth Paltrow because she's not one of the celebrities I would expected to be standing trial. And usually when it's court cases, it's usually about a bit of divorce or something to do with money, but this is actually to do with a hit-and-run ski crash that happened 7 years ago. It happened at a resort in Utah, and Gwyneth was going downhill, and apparently she collided with a retired optician called Terry Sanderson, and now he's suing her for $300,000 because he's saying he's been left with permanent brain damage, 4 broken ribs, and he said his quality of life has gone downhill since that incident 7 years ago. He didn't file for charges until 2019, so there was a 3-year gap. So now Gwyneth is now countersuing him for only $1 American, and also for her legal fees to be paid if she wins the case. Because what Gwyneth is arguing, that she's only being sued because of her status and who she is. And it does beg to question, if it was an incident that didn't occur with a celebrity, would we be hearing about this court case?
Doesn't she also claim he skied into her?
Yeah, so in Utah now, when it comes to ski resorts, whoever's further downhill has right of way. So both of them are arguing, actually, I was further down. They don't have any witnesses other than Gwyneth's ski instructor, who said that he saw Terry Sanderson on the slopes on the floor, but it was actually him that collided into Gwyneth and caused her distress. So now in this court case, we're going to be hearing from her husband, Brad Falchuk, and also her kids that will be taken to the stand, and it's expected that she'll take to the stand today.
Right.
OK, and there's been so much drama this week, hasn't there, about, I've been following it, something about she didn't like the cameras being pointed towards her in the courtroom. And then she was accused, I think it was, of offering sweets to the security guards.
Yeah, because Gwyneth is she's a lovely woman. You can't, I can't fault her for that, but she's the least person you would expect to be in a court case, and I think it's very exposing for her. And, these celebrities, they like to control when and how they're going to be pictured, and in a court case, you just don't have that kind of control or authority.
Now, there's been more trouble for other celebrities to do with cryptocurrency. Now, I don't understand
Neither do I. How about you, Aidan? You look like a man that might...
Not really.
Yeah,
I've heard people whispering on about it, but I like to have the cold, hard cash.
Same here. I'm all about give me the money, not the fake money. But cryptocurrency, we know celebrities, they're always promoting products on social media. And they were touting Lindsay Lohan, Jake Paul, Neo, and 5 other celebrities. They were promoting 2 cryptocurrencies, which actually turned out to be illegal.
Right.
And it was involved in a phrase called what's it called? Washing or something. Whitewashing, that's it. So they've been charged by US regulators for $400,000 for not actually confessing and saying that actually they were paid to promote this cryptocurrencies. So they've paid it without admitting guilt. But it's a very touchy subject when it comes to cryptocurrencies.
It's something... We're going to see more of this, as in not charges. I'm talking about cryptocurrency in general. It's the way things. It's the direction of travel, whether we like it or not, I think.
Well, you've got to, if you're promoting something, especially, it's one thing to promote something that people can buy. If you're promoting something which people can sort of invest in, but also lose a lot of money.
Yeah.
That's a sort of
it's not good. But I think as well, some of these celebrities are none the wiser, like the general public, about these things. Sometimes you would think celebrities are quite well off and they're rich, and why would they need to get in, quick fix schemes like this? But clearly they've been duped as well, because I'm sure if they knew that what they were doing was illegal, they probably wouldn't have got involved with it.
Can I throw another controversy at you?
Yes, you can.
Here,
I love
that
controversy.
You're not expecting. How many Oscars did Everything Everywhere All at Once win?
11.
Right.
Oh, she's very good. Look, she knows her
Something
stuff.
like that.
Yeah.
I watched it the other night.
What was your thoughts on it, Stephen?
I thought it was pretty dreadful.
Oh, no!
You know what, Ellie? That has been the talk in the film industry, in the showbiz industry. Not many people thought it was a good film, actually.
It doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't. It's all over the place. And I'm quite surprised that a film like that stature actually got so many Oscars. There's so many reasons behind it, which I don't want to talk about. But obviously, I think the Oscars are trying to be more politically correct. But a lot of the reviews...
I thought there were some good performances. I thought Michelle Yeoh was actually very good in it. Jamie Lee Curtis is in it. I thought her performance was very good, and I don't know his name, but the guy who plays the husband.
Yeah.
Again, I thought some of the performances were very skilled.
Yeah.
But as a story...
No, it's all over the place. It wasn't one of my favourite films this year for award season. But, again, sometimes you always get those wild cards. But I'm just hoping next year we can get back to picking quality films to win awards.
It's awful, because you don't want to detract from someone like Michelle Yeoh,
no, you
who made
don't.
history winning Best Actress.
Yeah.
But it was...
The storyline left something to be desired.
I didn't understand what was going on.
I thought you would have liked it, actually,
I like the concept of it.
Yeah.
But I just didn't... In the end, I'm just thinking, what on earth is going on here?
It's all over the place.
Don't you find that with a lot of Oscar-winning films, though? It's a very artsy, like, you have to understand it to appreciate
I wish that they could let the public vote on these awards, because then I think what we would be seeing up for Oscars or just nominations at award shows would be completely different.
It would be.
It would be all the Marvel stuff, wouldn't it?
Oh, I love Marvel.
I know you
Such a big
do.
Marvel fan.
Right, you two, don't go anywhere, because you're going to like this. Because as millions prepare to watch the Oxford-Cambridge boat race, Great Britain rowing stars are getting behind a new website to get us all into shape.
Yes, the website will allow the public to compare their efforts to record-breaking rowers.
Ah, well, despite rowing machines being a common sight in gyms, 26% of gym goers don't use them, apparently. Should we talk to someone who does?
Yes.
And who is 93-year-old indoor rower and record holder Val Coleman. Val, good morning to you. Why do you like to row at 93?
Because it's good for me, because I enjoy it. It libers you up. You meet all sorts of people, all sorts of nice people.
And Val, how long have you been rowing for?
Not long, about 2019. I broke my femur just after I was 90, and that's when I started. When I was recovering from that, when I was persuaded this would be good for me, and it certainly has been.
It's remarkable to take up rowing at 90, to be perfectly honest. But were you quite fit beforehand?
Yes, I was. Yes. I walk a lot and do Pilates and swim every morning.
Oh, so you are very fit. What is it that appeals to you about rowing? Because it is quite exhausting getting on a rowing machine. It's an awful lot to pull back. I mean, I don't find it particularly easy. What appeals to you about it?
It's certainly a lot to think about, but I'm told that you use your lower body, so that was good for me, and I just enjoy it. I like being active.
I know you're only as old as you feel, Val, but do you appreciate that for youngsters like us, it's and I'm nearly 50 and I feel like a youngster compared to you. Do you realise how remarkable it is to see a 93-year-old as fit and well as you? I just think it's astounding.
Well, I suppose it's not all that usual, but I don't think of myself as 93. I don't feel like I'm 93.
Well, you don't look 93, let me tell you.
Not at
You
all.
look great, Val. Can you give us a demonstration? Show us the speed you can get. Don't overexert yourself now, I'm worried. But just give us a demonstration of you rowing.
Oh, gosh.
Here we go.
Good technique.
Yeah.
It's hard to get going, isn't it? I struggle on a rowing machine.
I wonder what parts of the body it works. Is it just the legs?
No, it's the core as well.
Look, you have to pull back on the arms.
Really going.
It's a good all-round body workout.
So our sport expert here, Val, says you've got an excellent technique.
Don't stop.
No, I tell you, that's... So, do you do it every day, Val?
I try to, and the thing is, the machines have got a monitor on, so you can't lie.
No, there's no cheating it. Well, I'll tell you what, Val,
No.
it's what would you say to people who are thinking, oh, well, I'd like to get fitter, but I don't know, could I do it? Would I be embarrassed trying it? What would you say?
I'd say have a go, please have a go. The older you get, the more active you need to be.
And we were just saying then, 26% of people going to the gym don't use the rowing machine. Perhaps they feel intimidated by it. What would your advice be, just to jump on it and give it a go?
Jump on it and have a go, yes. And if you're concerned about it, ask somebody. There's an attendant there or something. Ask them how you use it.
Well, I tell you what, have you got children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, Val?
I've got lots, yes. 8 children. So I've got 20-odd great-grandchildren and grandchildren.
Well, I tell you what, they must be proud as punch of you for what you do. Thank you so much for talking to us today. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, and keep rowing. It's great stuff.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Wow. I just think that is... What
How
a lady.
inspiring. I love these silver influencers. Like, she does not look 93.
Oh, amazing. In a
That's
hoodie.
incredible.
Nice action.
Yeah.
Oh, you approved, did you?
Oh, yeah, without
Of the
doubt.
technique?
Yeah.
I tell you what, I think
Without
it gives us all hope that as you get older, that doesn't mean everything has to wind down.
No.
Still be rowing.
Well, still be. I tell you, there was an article in my local paper a couple of years ago that talked about an elderly couple, and when you got further down, they were 60.
Oh. Yeah. Oh.
And you just... But that used to be the attitude.
Yeah.
didn't it? But now you look, Val, 93, rowing away every day, looking fit as a fiddle.
That is inspiring.
Years ago, my dad put on a tracksuit one Sunday. First time I'd ever seen him in a tracksuit. He came into the conservatory where me and my brothers were playing. and we laughed our heads off.
Oh, you see, poor fella.
I know.
It's never too late,
He was
Aidan.
60 then.
Was he 60?
Yeah, he was. Yeah, he put
Yeah.
his tracksuit quickly back in the cupboard.
Oh, well, it's never too late to start. I think that's a message we can take
Never.
about. Started at 90. Incredible.
Remarkable. All power to her elbow.
Yeah.
Well, and her knees.
And her knees.
Yeah. There you
Yeah.
go.
Not her elbow, yeah.
She probably has a really strong core.
She must do. Yeah. Look, thank you both. Thanks to Val. Thank you to you for watching. We're back tomorrow morning, 6 o'clock.
Good morning, I'm Alex Deakin, and this is your latest weather from the Met Office. Some sunshine today, but there will be plenty more heavy showers as well, and a fairly gusty wind, especially across the south. That's where the isobars are closest. This area of low pressure has been dominating our weather for much of this week, and it's just going to throw more showers our way. Having said that, it is generally a bright, fine start for quite a few, certainly across much of the Midlands, eastern and southern England. Quite a bit of sunshine around, but the shower clouds will start to bubble up and they'll get going quite widely by late morning and into the early afternoon. Some heavy showers in places, thunderstorms are possible. They will tend to move through on the brisk breeze, certainly across England and Wales, but frequent showers for Northern Ireland, some quite heavy, slow-moving showers across central and northern Scotland. In the sunny spells, temperatures getting up into the teens once more, 14, 15 across the southeast, generally 10 to 12 Celsius, but feeling cooler when the showers come along. Lots of showers, quite a wet evening this evening for Northern Ireland and southwest Scotland. Elsewhere, again, the showers continuing to whiz by through the night, leading into a showery start to the weekend. It will be, again, reasonably mild with temperatures mostly 6s and 7s across central areas, maybe 7 or 8 further south, but turning colder across northern parts with fresher air moving in during the weekends. Initially across northern Scotland, plenty of showers still across southern Scotland, northeast England tomorrow morning. Gradually easing here, and elsewhere not as many showers, better chance of a drier day for Wales and southern England and across northern Scotland, although here, as I mentioned, it is turning colder, temperatures struggling somewhat. Still double digits to maybe teens elsewhere, but that colder air is going to win out as one area of low pressure moves away. This one will bring some more wet weather across the south, but as that clears on Saturday night, the colder conditions drop more widely across the country for Sunday. Goodbye.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.